Welcome everybody. We're here for the Wednesday, April 11th, 2012 Board of County Commissioners regular meeting. Our first item on our agenda is something that we feel is very dear to our hearts. It's a proclamation of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County recognizing Child Abuse Prevention Month. Would y'all, all the representatives, want to come up at least and be front and center? Before we get started, Kim, would you like to introduce everyone?
Sure. My name is Kim Dubois, and I'm the Adult and Family Services Manager for Pickens County. Inoa Buhan is our case aid specialist and interpreter, a cultural interpreter. Rachel Liebel is a caseworker. Sarah Fedishin is a caseworker. Nan Sundin is the director of our department, and Bruce Benjamin is our support person. He's the child abuse specialist for Pickens County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, thank you, and we sincerely appreciate everything you all do for us, the greater community.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll be redundant and read the title again and get with it here. A proclamation of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, recognizing Child Abuse Prevention Month. Whereas children are the key to the county's future success, prosperity, and quality of life, and while our children are our most valuable resource, they are also our most vulnerable. And whereas children have the right to a right to be safe and to be provided an opportunity to thrive, learn, and grow, and parents have the right and responsibility to raise children in a safe manner. And whereas children abuse and neglect can be reduced and prevented by supporting and strengthening healthy, trusting family bonds. And whereas Pickens County recognizes that parents and families have strengths that are appreciated and built upon to encourage healthy change, and that family involvement is the key to success in preventing child abuse. And whereas Pickens County plays a vital role in child and family safety by providing public services through Health and Human Services Department and Sheriff's Department, who work closely together to protect children and strengthen families. And whereas we know that strong community partnerships and services are critical to keeping children, adults, and families safe and successful. Thus, Pickens County recognizes that effectively intervening in the lives of children and families threatened by abuse is a shared community responsibility, and highly values the strong partnerships that exist in our community between youth and family, serving nonprofits, schools, law enforcement, human services, faith community, and extended family. And whereas Pickens County is fortunate to be able to financially support youth and family community services through the distribution of Pickens County Healthy Community Grant Funds. And whereas by providing safe and nurturing environment for our children, free of violence, abuse, and neglect, we can ensure that Pickens County children will grow to their full potential as the next generation of healthy citizens. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners that April is Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Month in Pickens County. Well, thank you everybody. We sincerely again appreciate what you do. It all starts with children, and let's usher in the next generation of adults in a good way.
In our office. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Kim, did you want to just give a quick announcement? I know you've got a guest speaker coming up.
I would love to do that. Yeah. And also I wanted to let people know that they can contact us if they need any information at 970-429-2040 extension 1. And we have a special speaker coming in April 30th. Her name is Feather Burkauer, and she specializes in helping parents identify issues related to child sexual abuse. She's a great speaker. She's a national speaker, and she's coming to our community. And if you want more information, again, you can call 429-2040 extension 1, and we would love to have you join us that night. Thank you.
Thanks, George. That was on top. Do we have any additions or deletions, John?
Mr. Chair, we have one addition to the agenda. Yesterday, we discussed adding an executive session at the end of today's meeting for the purpose of attorney advice on specific questions, while the citation will be going.
Okay, good. Thank you. Public comment. Would we have any members of the public here to share with us any kind of information or feedback they'd like? Are you all here for a public comment, maybe?
Oh, wow, is there a room for public comment?
Well, I'm not sure. I better get you outside and ask you what. No. Please introduce yourself and
my name's
take
Paul.
a couple minutes only.
My name's Paul Tiger, and I live in Longmont. I am here in town seeing David Bentley, my friend, and I know Janice and Dwight, and have chatted with them a number of times over what I think that you have here that's a very specific and issue that has to do with voting and elections, and really campaign finance reform and the problems with your charter, problems or not, whatever. I know that you guys are working on this, and I've come to urge you along in doing the right thing. I realize that setting a charter amendment before the voters can often be pretty confusing if it's a cleanup, and Dwight has chatted with me a little bit about what had been proposed. I think that people in Pitkin County are smart enough to figure it out, and I hope that that would be the route that you would go. And anyway, thanks so much for giving it the whirl and making life easier for people who work in administrating elections. It can be pretty difficult, and not having a lot of clarity. There's not a lot of clarity everywhere. Let's have some clarity there. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments. I'm sure that it is our intention to bring our charter elements relative to campaign finance, make it consistent with current state law and transparent as possible.
That's difficult, making it control.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Okay, seeing no further public comment, we'll go to commissioner comments. Anyone? George? I'm going to let you do your thing at the end, Rick. I'm somewhat anticipating some historical, and I hope.
It's got to be brief, but you go ahead.
George,
I
please.
just want to mention that obviously we're ending close to a ski season, and although our snowpack is down substantially, I really wanted to acknowledge and thank the Aspen Skiing Company. We probably have forgotten because it's mid-April now, but Ski Company actually opened up their slopes ahead of time this year. Snowmass was open a week prior to Thanksgiving, and I was able to ski pretty much throughout the entire winter, and except for maybe about 10 days after the holidays where the snow was really sketchy. The skiing actually has been very good, and it still is very good for the last closing weekend coming up here for Snowmass and Aspen Mountain, and then Highlands the next weekend on the 22nd. But I think kudos really goes out to the snowmaking crew to begin with, because without that great work that the snowmaking crew has done, we would not have skiing today with this warm weather. But you can still ski top to bottom. And also thanks to the great job that the groomers have done throughout the season to farm the little snow that we've had during these storms. They've made the skiing actually very enjoyable. And although it's been a very warm March, I think people have actually really enjoyed being out there for these bluebird days. And I would just encourage people to take advantage of the last 2 weekends. And I also noted today, coming up on the Raptor bus, that the bike racks are on the Raptor buses. It's great. So you can ski in the morning and go for a bike ride down Valley and grab the bus, wrap the bus back up to town. So enjoy springtime.
Well, thanks, George, and you're absolutely right about the groomers. They are the stars of the year, unequivocally. We don't have snowmaking over all the funds, but groomers, they made it happen. So good, thanks for that. Rachel, thanks for your patience.
Oh, no, thank you. Kind of a quick reminder for those residents of Pickens County who are also residents of the city of Aspen. This April 15th is the last day to file for your sales tax food rebate. And you simply have to have been a resident of Aspen for the past year. The forms are available over at City Hall, and it closes the end of this week. So it's really very helpful, certainly with families with kids and seniors. There's a little extra for people in those categories. So be sure to get your form in. It's easy enough to forget with the rush of thinking about the IRS forms that are needed by the 15th. The second thing I really would like to say is that we're already seeing a lot of activity for fire season. And it's going to be a tough year. I mean, there's no question about it. We could all pray for monsoon rains and we watch out for floods. But as it looks right now, it's just a very, very dry year and potentially drought. So both thank a firefighter, thank a volunteer, and do your part to make sure you don't have fire hazards around your home, that you've cleared defensible space, that you have your go bag ready to go if you ever should get one of those reverse 911 calls to tell you to just clear out as quickly as possible. And remind a few others. Sometimes it's as simple as someone forgetting that throwing their cigarette butt out the car window is a dangerous thing this time of year. Always a bad habit, but sometimes we just forget those sort of little things. Make sure any barbecue you have is fully out when you go inside to eat your steaks. And pay attention to the fire ban. It's there for a reason. And we all, again, thank our local volunteers, our firefighters. They're already having a very busy season. And the last thing I guess I'd like to do is just kind of acknowledge that Easter Sunday just passed, and that whether you are a faith individual in the Christian tradition or any of the other traditions, the celebration of springtime is always a very meaningful kind of rebirth of all the flowers coming up and trees budding out and life begins again. And for many families, it's not as joyous an occasion as it was for those of us here, those who've lost family members at war, those who still have family members at war, those who are coping with tremendous illnesses and injuries, permanent injuries for those who've returned. And so I would just like to ask for a moment of silence that these individuals and their families can all find a little peace, a little grace, and a little comfort.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. We'll do exactly as requested. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Rachel, I appreciate you doing that on most Wednesday, regular meetings. I think it's an important statement to recognize the sacrifice that our soldiers and families make and the losses. And it's not about politics. This is about really peace and humanity in the way it should be, and we ought to be reminded about that often. Thanks again. Okay, we're going to go to the consent action portion of our agenda. First item, minutes of work sessions 3/6, 3/13, 3/20, and 3/27, 2012. Regular meeting of 3/28, 2012. Second item is a resolution approving appointments of members to the Rural Resort Regional Workforce Development Board. Third item, resolution supporting the continuation of the state's current distribution of lottery funds, which I'd like to pull and have Dale give us a little feedback so we help educate the public as to what's going on. The fourth item, resolution appointing citizen board members. Do I have a motion to approve items 1, 2, and 4?
Jack, I was not here for the 27th or the 28th.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Yvette,
I'm not here for one of these either, and so perhaps we can break them down into a couple different motions if you'd like us all to vote.
yeah, Rachel, which one?
I was not here for 3-6, so
Okay.
I will make a motion to approve the work session minutes of 3:13, 3:20, and 3:20. We'll just do those two first, because then Rob can vote.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
We'll kind of get through this here. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay,
And I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of 3-6 work session.
did we just do that?
No, we didn't. And then I'll abstain from this one.
Yeah. Is that it, Rob?
Just 3-6.
How about the regular meeting? Were you here?
No.
Just the 3-6.
Yeah.
That's the only one. And then
Okay, so is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Abstain.
And
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meetings of the work session of March 27th and a regular meeting on March 28th.
I'll second that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
abstain.
Okay. Lindy, I think we got them all done. And so now, how about item 2? No one's requested pulling, so item 2 and 4, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good. And then, Dale, if you have a moment.
Thank you, Jack. The resolution that
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Dale Will, I'm the Director of Pitkin County Open Space and Trails. The resolution that we have prepared addresses interest by some in tapping the state lottery for some new uses of that fund. And as I think everyone knows, the state lottery, pursuant to the state constitution and the direction of the voters in 1992, allocates the lottery revenue to a couple of environmental programs, one being GOCO and another being the Conservation Trust. GOCO allocates its portion of the lottery fund out through 4 quadrants. One goes to the Division of Wildlife, one goes to the state parks, and I guess those two are going to be essentially merged. Third quadrant is local government through competitive grants, and the fourth quadrant is open space acquisition and also in competitive grants. Pitkin County has been a partner with GOCO. They were created just 2 years after our own open space program, and the collaboration between the two entities has led to a lot of public assets being acquired that are of benefit to us as well as to all the future generations. We also receive a pro rata distribution of the Conservation Trust dollars. At one time that was funding the county's wildlife officer, and at this point that money is helping to maintain open space properties and being utilized by the open space department for that. We also know that the state fiscal situation is not pretty, and in virtually every sector you might want to look at, whether it's transportation or education. The state has some pretty serious budget shortfalls, and there is a proposal on the table in the state Senate, actually today, to refer a measure out It would ultimately have to be approved by the voters as an amendment to the state constitution, but that would tap the state lottery fund to provide additional support for veterans. And veterans have needs that are not being met, and it's easy to understand they're looking for places where they might be able to help. However, the open space department and board's perspective on this is you don't want to raid one public program that's working well to fund another one, particularly when the funding that could be released, even if you want to change the priority, it's not really adequate to solve the problem of veterans. The way I understand the current proposal, it would create a new committee to think about how they could help veterans with the dollars that might be available, but there isn't an amount there that is matched in any way to what the need is overall. So consequently, we're asking the commissioners to support a resolution that's simply supporting the existing allocations from the state lottery to protect the programs that have been established through that allocation, and to not be looking at this pot as a way to try to make what I believe would be rather symbolic overtures to some of the other public needs that are out there in the state.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dale. Yesterday we actually had a brief consideration of this, I think both at Open Space, with our Open Space Board and our board, and we chose to forward a letter ahead of this because we wanted to get it on the record so Senator Schwartz would have it available on the floor, I think, or no, on committee, at committee. And so we've done that. The public must understand that we clearly are supportive of veterans. Just a simple example that Rachel brings to us often is one of the many ways in our Veterans Park and how we celebrate Memorial Day and Veterans Day, etc. But Dale is absolutely right. This is more of a symbolic attempt, and it undermines, I think, speaking clearly for myself here, but undermines an important public program that has benefits far-reaching more than just open space. So we support our veterans, and both the federal government and where state governments might play ought to do the right thing and look at it comprehensively and take care of the problem that way, not by incrementally diminishing benefits in one way and creating a maybe program in another. So, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. You know, there are, as you've outlined, tremendous state shortfalls in funding. You could trace this back to any number of things, whether it's TABOR, Taxpayer Bill of Rights, whether you trace it back to a measure that was put forward during the go-go years under the Owens administration, which reduced personal income tax from 5% down to 4.65. But our state finances are just a mess. They are constitutionally required to do this, that, and the other thing. We've talked about the interplay with Gallagher, Tabor, Amendment 23 before. So our state legislature really doesn't have much discretion over a number of required mandatory programs. We've not raised our gasoline tax in the state since the 90s. It has not kept pace with inflation, and those deficits are now somewhere between $60 to $90 billion. At the same time, our state is anticipating adding another 5 million residents by the year 2050. And that's an awful lot of pressure on public lands and private lands that perhaps should be conserved for some of their recreational and wildlife habitat values. We all support GOCO, and we all have for a long time. It's a tremendous value to what it's been able to do in our valley, let alone other communities we all enjoy and visit. But I wanted to just kind of take a moment to point out that the situation is getting a little desperate for state funding for all sorts of things. And there's a proposal as well this year to create video lottery terminals in airports to start to fund college scholarships. Because we're no longer funding higher education. We're somewhere around the 49th in the state for funding higher education. and you start to ask, how are we going to be a competitive workforce? How are we going to be a competitive state in the future for attracting jobs and the type of high-paying jobs that we all need, that need skilled workers? I'm going to be missing a meeting later this month because the governor has started a new process that's called To Be Determined or To Be Decided Colorado, where they're trying to hold regional dialogues in 40 different parts of the state to discuss this whole interplay of issues and funding needs and see what the solutions will be. I have a lot of empathy for the legislators who introduced this bill. I think they're trying to do something good, but at the same time, as we've already stated, you don't tear down one program that's doing well to try to Band-Aid other programs when they should have their own simple and secure dedicated funding source. Last year, at the end of the year, there was a effort by some citizen groups on the Front Range to send all their legislators Crayola crowns in the mail to say that you should put lottery funds towards school finance, although that shortfall is anticipated to be close to $1.5 billion a year by 2016. And the results have been, we have a number of school systems throughout the state that are now doing just 4-day school weeks. And so at a certain point, you hate to say, to be taxed, but there's a point at which you only get out of it what you put into it. And as a community, as a state, we're putting less in than we really need to take care of our future needs. So we have to find new ways to look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Dale, thanks. We're going to go ahead and see if we can get a motion to approve. Anyone want to make a motion?
So moved.
And a second, please?
Second.
Great. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Dale.
Thank you.
I want to admit that I was remiss just for a moment, and I apologize to the board and the public. I like to read the volunteers that we appoint and their positions, and I kind of passed over that, so I'm going to take a moment to do this. And we very much appreciate our volunteers. We wouldn't be the organization and the community we are without our volunteers. They're very important to us. So our new volunteers that have been appointed to various boards are as such: Barbara Smith, Pitkin County Library; Sandra Kaplan, Senior Services Council; Corby Anderson, Translator Advisory Board; Doug Lukes, the Translator Advisory Board; Jessica Robson, Translator Advisory Board; Robert Throm, Senior Services Council; and Buzz Dobkin, Senior Services Council. Appreciate you letting me catch up here, everyone. Okay, we're going to go to the next portion of our agenda. It's under consent actions, first readings, and we'll be setting.
Did we do a motion to pass the appointments?
Yeah.
Yes, that was all.
It was together.
Yeah, the first two, Rob. And I apologize for being a little out of sync. And we are going to set these following items for public hearing on April 25th. Item 5 is an ordinance for the lease agreements with the community nonprofit lessees and authorizing the chairman to execute lease agreements for space located at the Michael W. Schultz Health and Human Services Building. Item 6 is an ordinance approving a lease agreement with the Aspen Valley Hospital District and authorizing the chairman to execute the lease agreement for space located at the Michael W. Schultz Health and Human Services Building. Item 7 is a resolution accepting grant offer or offers from the Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Program and the Colorado Division of Aeronautics Discretionary Grant Program to assist in the funding of capital improvements at the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport. Item 8 is a resolution providing supplemental appropriations to the 2012 budget for 2011 carry-over projects. And item 9 is a resolution providing supplemental appropriations to the 2011 year-end budget. Do we have any discussion or any desire to pull any of those items? Seeing none, I would request a motion.
I would make a motion to approve the consent actions, first reading set for public hearing on April 25th as described.
And items 5 through 9 on our agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to go to our consent public hearings, and this is second readings. I'll just try to catch up myself here. Okay, we have 4 items here on our agenda. Item 10 is a resolution adopting Translator Advisory Board and Election Commission bylaws. Item 11 is a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding with Eagle County and Gunnison County in order to enable the establishment and administration of a revolving loan fund to provide financing for energy-efficient home improvements for county residents for Energy Smart revolving loan fund. That was almost a half a mouthful. Item 12, resolution adopting an intergovernmental agreement with Aspen Valley Hospital to provide paging services. And item 13 is an ordinance approving a non-exclusive easement to RAFTA. I'd like to pull the item 10 to clarify its evolution. George?
I'd like to pull 11 and 12.
Good. So what is left is item 13, an ordinance approving a non-exclusive easement to RAFTA. Brian, why don't you just, if you wouldn't mind, give us a quick understanding of what this is, since this very much involves public property, etc.
Correct. This easement...
And introduce yourself,
Thank
please.
you. Brian Pettit, I'm the Public Works Director for the county. And Mike Herms is here. He's the project manager for RAFTA with regard to BRT expansion and capital improvements. But this easement is contained within a green belt the county owns within its general fund, just outside the airport business center. It's the BRT station. It will be the station that provides a service to down valley users. The up valley area will come to the board at a later time. The easement is needed because they'll be expanding the BRT station onto the green belt that the county owns, and this will allow that expansion to take place, both the stop itself and also connectivity from pedestrians through sidewalks. So this would allow BRT to expand on the down valley side and at the AABC. And so it's land that the county really doesn't have a use for at this time, and it is non-exclusive. It wouldn't negate any of the rights that the county has with regard to the land. It would just allow RAFTA to have their BRT station exist on it.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. This is an important, just one piece of many, many important pieces to make BRT work. So we're certainly, we've been following this for many years since we began discussing BRT. Have a great federal grant, which we're very much appreciative of, and we're ready to, and we have begun implementing and talking about parking lots and reconfigured roads as is necessary. So this is one of the many pieces. Any comments? Rachel, please.
Yes, I'm going to support this resolution, and I appreciate that we're doing further work with the Up Valley stop on the other side. Look forward to seeing that. But it's my understanding that there is a groundbreaking ceremony this weekend.
Yeah, on Saturday.
Okay, and I was wondering if you would take a moment and tell the public about. I'm going to offer my apologies in advance. I'm going to be down in Pueblo this weekend, so I'm not going to be able to attend. But please pass along my great support to Jan Blankenship and others.
Just quickly, on Saturday, we're having a groundbreaking ceremony at the Carbondale Park and Ride, where we've started construction already for BRT. We've got some big holes and a lot of equipment down there. Peter Rogoff from the FTA will be speaking. A couple people from the Governor's Energy Office, someone on behalf of Senator Bennett, so we have a list of speakers for that. It starts about 11:30. There's all kinds of food and activities and things like that, so a very family-friendly thing. So there's a lot going on. We go to about 2, 3 o'clock, and so it's a great groundbreaking for it. And anybody that come, it'd be great if you could come out and support it. And talk to some of the FTA people that came out from DC and Region 8 and all over the state, basically. So everybody's supporting this project politically, and also all of our subcontractors and designers and everybody that's put time into it the last few years getting it ready to go. So,
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Rachel, thanks. Good heads up. Alert people. George.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge and make a note in terms of the tremendous work that RAPTA has done over the years. You know, RAPTA is the second largest public mass transit system in the state, which is pretty amazing when you consider all the other larger communities. And the BRT program, the Bus Rapid Transit program that is about to kick off on Saturday, will be the first rural bus rapid transit system in the country. And so those are two great feats and acknowledgments, and hopefully this BRT program will become a model for other communities to look at in terms of improving access and mass transit. So good job, Mike, and Angie, and all the staff at RAPTA. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Appreciate it. Okay, Board, I'd like to request a motion.
This is a public hearing, Joe.
Ah, yes, good. I'd like to open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone that would like to present some feedback to us or comments? Seeing none, I will close that public hearing. I'm going to do them individually and request a motion. Thanks again, Lindy.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the ordinance approving a non-exclusive easement to RAPTA.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Another 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to ask Janice, if you have a couple moments.
I apologize for the resolution. I don't believe it got into the
Yeah,
packet.
just looking for
Thank you, Lynn.
Oh, so this is relative to this.
Yeah, that goes with the transit.
Yeah. I'm Jody also. Yeah, I was focusing. The reason why I asked both of you to come up and please introduce yourselves in a moment. We do have the bylaws for two boards, both the Election Commission and the Translator Advisory Board, and we had a good discussion last time, and I would just like to clarify some items. Janice, would you introduce yourself?
My name is Janice Voss-Caudill. I'm the Pickens County Clerk and Recorder.
Good.
Jody Smith, the Facilities Manager.
Thank you. On the, let's go by order. On the Translator Advisory Board, I had requested a insertion of some language about the potential, and I in my time as a commissioner, I'm not sure if we've removed anyone, but part of the bylaws does address that issue. And I had requested that after the language says a board member may be removed from the board for good cause only by a vote of the BOCC after a recommendation concerning removal is made by the board. And my question would be, is staff comfortable with that? I mean, because I wanted to have staff have the ability, and I know I'm a little bit putting you on the line, Jody, but you were here last time. I wanted us to make sure that if a board is unable to take that kind of action, staff could do that. Are you comfortable that we could deal with an issue like that without inserting language?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that the board would end up making a recommendation, and the staff, I would come representing them, or I could make that recommendation myself.
Yeah, but we don't need to put it formally. Good. Okay. Well, thank you. And Janice, on the Election Commission bylaws, there had been on first reading reference to the secretary taking notes. Now that has been eliminated?
That's been eliminated. I had communication with my board, spoke with John, and I felt that based on the energy you had, it would be appropriate to just follow the processes and be consistent with all the other commissions. So everyone was fine with that. So we'll move forward as with our processes as other commissions do.
Maybe consistent with other boards, etc. Good. Well, thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. Any questions on this item from anyone else? I would request, thanks again, I would request a motion to move this forward. And, this is a public hearing. Excuse me, I'm getting ready here. And seeing no one to really be aggressively wanting to comment, we'll close that public hearing and bring it back to the board now for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, approving the Citizen Board bylaws as presented.
Is there a second? Second, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, our next item is a resolution concerning a memorandum of understanding with Eagle and Gunnison counties to enable the establishment and administration of a revolving loan fund. George, would you like to...
Well, I just wanted to, I noted that Nathan is here with Mona West, and Mona is... Mona, thank you, I don't know what I was going to say that.
New West Society.
I wanted to introduce Mona to the public and to us. Mona is going to be the new Executive Director for CORE, so welcome.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and if I could just briefly introduce Mona, she'll be starting on June 1st. So she's here this week doing a birth by fire with us. We're trying to introduce her to the litany of things that are going on in the valley. Mona has a lot of experience, and I'm personally thrilled that she's coming on board. For about 15 years, she ran the Center for Resource Conservation in Boulder, which is very much akin to CORE. Had some great accomplishments there. Went to the private market for a couple of years, working with solar and renewable energy credits. And she's since been a senior manager at the Governor's Energy Office, working on wind development and as a regional representative. She has a pretty good history of working with folks in the Valley, namely CORE and Randy. And I think she'll be an awesome partner for you guys. And I am really excited. It makes my transition a lot easier knowing that I hand the reins over to someone who's so accomplished. So here's your new director.
Yeah, I just wanted to welcome Mona and say thank you very much for all the hard work that Nathan has provided, not only for CORE, but for the community. I mean, CORE has done some tremendous work, and it's been built on Nathan's leadership. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that, and I think you'll find even greater things from Mona in the future team. So thanks for your support.
And Nathan, we certainly do appreciate your contribution. Look forward to working with you, Mona. And we would be remiss if we didn't recognize Cindy Hubin, our Director of ComDev, who works very hard with all of this, the challenges relative to energy, land use, and all of that. So, thank you.
And I'm recently appointed to the board as one of your representatives, the board of CORE, as one of your representatives, along with George, and so I look forward to being more involved in the details. So,
oh, tremendous.
So, Nathan, the revolving loan fund, which we're going to pass a resolution on, when will those funds actually be available for people to take advantage of, and how will that process occur?
Well, the important thing is that through the DOE grant, those funds will be made available to Eagle County, who's the lead recipient on this grant, immediately once this resolution is passed. It's already been approved in Gunnison and Eagle County. The Energy Smart team has been working with funding partners, who's going to be the executioner on this, for a number of months. And so I think they have probably a couple more months of work to do to get to the final point where they can then offer loans to the public. But this is kind of the major step to receive the funds from the Department of Energy. And once those are in-house, it's just a matter of time working out the logistics of how this will be presented to the community. So it's very near term.
Thank you.
and just some of the mechanics of all of that. This came before you as a memorandum of understanding with Eagle County and Gunnison County on February 22nd. We put it off in March, actually, and because we wanted to have Gunnison and Eagle sign a final version, so we were all going around with different versions of the same memorandum of understanding. So I apologize, but I put that in your packet as a memorandum of understanding, and Wendy was kind enough to tell me it really needed to be in resolution form. So it's in front of you now in a resolution form. It's the same content. It just has the more appropriate title and resolution number and signature blanks. So it's the same content. And if you remember way back in February when we talked about this, it was you had asked several questions and asked for several minor amendments to the resolution. We took those forward to Gunnison and Eagle. Those were accepted and adopted in their format. So here we are with an agreement that's been signed by both of those communities, and we're ready to sign today. What it does and doesn't do. What it doesn't do is it doesn't obligate us in any way. If we find out that the agreement of the revolving loan fund is something for some reason we can't live with, I was thinking out of the box that there was such an interest rate that compounded with someone over a long-term period where, in fact, you didn't feel like that was something you wanted to pass on to a citizen. We don't have to accept those agreements and move forward. This is an agreement to agree to work together on a revolving loan fund so that we can implement this grant and then hopefully create this three-way working agreement with the communities, the other counties, and move forward with the goals of more energy efficiency in single-family and multifamily homes in the community.
Great.
We also, working with Eagle County and Gunnison County several years back, we passed through our voters' approval the Energy Smart Loan Program. And that, of course, has been held up by the Federal Home Loan Bank in terms of not allowing Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae to participate in that program. And we have sent letters on to those folks to let them know how important it is to move that program, which is also known as the PACE program, along. So I don't know if Mona or Nathan, if you've heard any word on what's going on with that process?
Go ahead, Barbara.
We've said, we've all sent comments, and in fact, the Governor's Energy Office also sent a letter of comments by the end date, which is, I believe, March 23rd, because there was an open opportunity for comments about the programs. I believe they received tons of comments, and now they're reviewing everything, and we should hear back in the not-too-distant future about whether they will move forward. I will say that, Governor's Energy Office, we've had incredible support from Congressional District as well. Members of the Congressional District have been supportive of the program, so we're hoping to write something, get something moving forward. And then I will say that the Governor's Energy Office, we have a market financial manager, Paul Scharfenberger, and he's very committed to developing a permanent instrument within the state to continue this kind of a program. So I think this just really helps to support what the state is doing. Even if the feds can't get everything resolved, we're working very diligently at the state level too to make sure that there's going to be some instrument statewide residents and homeowners will be able to take advantage of.
Good. Anything more?
I think that's it. I thank you guys for supporting Phase 2, and I know you were pretty active in getting that out there. Fortunately, there's communities around the country that are trying to get the same thing done, so hopefully there's enough input to move the FHFA on this issue.
Yeah, good luck in your educational pursuits.
Thanks, I'll miss you guys.
Down the road here. Many thanks for kind of shaping us up here, and I'd like to see if anyone would like to, well, I'm going to open the public hearing and see if anyone would like to speak. Seeing no one, we'll close that public hearing and bring it back to the board for action or a motion.
I'd like to make that motion. I'd like to approve the resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, approving a memorandum of understanding with the Board of County Commissioners of Eagle County and Gunnison County in order to enable the establishment and administration of a revolving loan fund to provide financing for energy-efficient home improvements for county residents.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Thanks, guys.
Welcome to our community, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, we have one more item on our consent public hearing portion of our agenda, setting for second reading. It's a resolution authorizing the board to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Aspen Valley Hospital District for alphanumeric paging services.
Excuse me, Jack, this is the second hearing.
This is the second.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I thought you said
I think
set
that-
for second reading.
I might have said that. Thanks for the clarification again. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself? And go forward.
Mark Gamrat, Communications Director at Pickens County.
Thank you.
This is an agreement with AVH. We provide alphanumeric paging services to them for their notifications of any type of page outfit they may need. Paging system is valley-wide, and in the past we've done this on a contract basis. That hasn't bode very well, and I think this will kind of memorialize our relationship with them and to move forward with costs and things like that.
And so this is just memorializing what we've been doing, and hopefully it will become more efficient.
Correct, exactly.
George, did you have?
Actually, I just want to take advantage since Mark was going to be here today as our communications director, because I've had several people who've asked me and had concerns about our reverse 911, and especially given all the press with the Conifer fire and some of the issues and problems that have come up because of that. So I just wanted to ask you how our reverse 911 is working, and or do you foresee any problems, given, as Rachel talked earlier about this, we're going probably into an extreme fire season, which has already started quite early.
I think I just talked to the press today about that. Just to give everybody an overview, there's basically three ways we notify. There's the emergency alert system with EAS, which is local TV, local radio stations. We have Pick an Alert, which is cell phone, email, and paging. And then we have another vendor that everybody calls reverse 911, but there's the landlines. So there's three ways to do this. They're not 100% guarantee notification systems. With the Front Range fire, there have been problems with that. It is our best to try to notify these people, but with technology and all the variables that go in with that, it's just not 100% accurate, unfortunately. So with those three avenues, I think we have a pretty good basis of notifying people. But people need to be prepared, like Rachel said earlier, to evacuate and whatever. But we will do our best with those three different notification systems.
And Rachel?
I know it would probably take a lot of planning, but I'm wondering if we could do some sort of test run of the system in the early spring or summer, and have the message say, this is a test, to make sure you're connected. I don't know how we would then, advertise if you did not receive one of these messages on your answering machine, please call us or something like that. But I just wonder if what type of resources or how is the system tested?
Well, the EAS system, I think everybody's kind of seen that scroll once in a while on the TV with that blaring noise. So that's tested. Pick an Alert goes out quite a bit, so I feel pretty confident that that is a working system. The reverse 911, the landline system, there is a cost with that. I believe it's 25 cents a line. So if we do a test, it'll cost quite a bit of money. But going on what you said is, how do we verify that test that it worked? And that's a good question. Do we have everybody call us back, which I don't think would be appropriate. The system does work. But there's all those variables. If you have a cordless phone and the power goes out, you're not going to get your message. If you're on the phone and the message comes through and you don't acknowledge that beep for the call waiting, you won't get your message. The answering machines are supposed to work. and leave messages, as opposed to. Sometimes answering machines are set for too many rings or not enough rings. There's just so many variables in this, and it's unfortunate. And I wish I had a better answer for you about the reliability of it. So.
You know what does strike me from your description of that is perhaps working with Pat Bingham, we can get the word out a little more about signing up for the pick-in alerts, to kind of increase the data bank of people who have already signed up for that, because you do have to self-select and sign up for that system.
With Pat and with Blair over in the APD and Public Safety Council, we're starting to get all that out. But yeah, we plan on doing a big push for all that stuff for obvious reasons.
Thank you.
I have a question for John Ely. Rachel, your idea was thoughtful, but I'm wondering about the legal part of doing a test. Golly, here's reverse 911, we had a heart attack, it was a test. Is there any liability? Would a public entity have a liability, a legal liability?
I can't imagine there would be liability for that, and the test, as I understand it, comes out with it. It's right off the bat, this is a test as opposed to any other announcement. The problem really is, like, as Mark said, how do you judge the results afterwards? And that's the execution is more of the difficulty than anything.
Thank you.
And I could bring this to the Public Safety Council and see how they feel about that. If the commissioners would like at our next meeting. For a test. Like I said, verifying the results is, I'm not sure how we do that.
Well, you could bring it, but it certainly makes sense to bring the idea, but then also an understanding of how we might track the results. That would be part and parcel, Rachel.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The 25 cents per is a daunting number. What's interesting to me is, you always get these solicitations to buy robocalls, and I don't know if there's a way to use a service like that with the same phone list or something, because they tend to sell them for close to 3 cents or 5 cents a call when you're doing quantity. So I just think it might be worth looking to see if there's different avenues to continue to reach the public.
I will follow up on that with the vendor also about what they do for internal testing. They must do something. I'll follow up.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any further discussions or questions? This is a public hearing. I'd like to open that public hearing. Does anyone would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing and bring it back to the board for action and a motion.
I would make a motion to approve the resolution adopting an intergovernmental agreement with Aspen Valley Hospital to provide paging services.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the follow-up. Okay, we are...
You're cranking.
Yeah, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Too soon.
Oh, just for some humor. That was only a jack, not a really. Land use consent public hearings. We're at that portion of our agenda. We have 2 items that are to be continued. The Ashcroft Ski Touring Star Mill site rezoning, and that is continued to June 13th, 2012. And the Ashcroft Ski Touring Star Mill site ski rec master plan amendment and activity envelope, GMQS exemption, and that also is continued to June 13th, 2012. Do I have a motion to continue?
I'd like to make a motion to continue the 2 items that you just mentioned.
Okay, we'll second, but you still have to check the public hearing and open the public hearing. Make sure no one's here to comment.
Yeah, well, we'll do that.
Okay.
And is there anyone here? I'm opening that public hearing. Apparently no comments. We'll close that public hearing and ask for a vote of the board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. One take it. Oh, wait a minute.
Maybe flip over, Jack.
Yeah, oh, okay, yeah. I'm going, I had several other items. So we do have, under land use, board, want a break, or you want to just kind of go through till the more discussion?
Why don't we do this one and then go to the more discussion?
Okay. Under land use consent actions, and this is not a public hearing, so we won't open anything. We have an ordinance rezoning the North Fork Frying Pan amendment to the BOCC ordinance of 001, that's ordinance 1 of 2001. This is the second reading. Suzanne?
Yes, as you said, Jack, this is second reading, and this is just really an amendment to an earlier ordinance where the text of the ordinance becomes inconsistent with the map that was attached. And our research has shown that the map was correct, and that all of the private lands up the North Fork of the Frying Pan should have been rezoned to what is now called RS 35. So this would make that correction and show that all those private lands, so the larger parcel that we talked about a little bit last time that's owned by the Nichols Trust, as well as all of the smaller private parcels that are included within that area. So it's essentially the big rectangle that is the private lands up the North Fork of the Frying Pan. So I'm happy to answer questions, but...
You had notification or feedback for the private property owners?
I have spoken to a number. I did send out a letter to all of them explaining that we were doing this. I've spoken to probably a handful of owners who called to get more information about that, and everybody seemed satisfied that this was cleaning up something that was intended previously and just was not.
And this is consistent with the master plan for the Frying Pan. George?
And Suzanne, were you able to notify and contact the caucus?
I did send basically the same letter, the letter that I sent out to the property owners. I also emailed to the caucus, to our contact at the caucus, and did not have any direct, response from the caucus. Just like I said, I did speak to a number of the private property owners.
Seeing no requests for further comment or discussion, I'd like a motion relative to the North Fork of the Upper Frying Pan Valley rezoning amendment.
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance rezoning the North Fork Frying Pan amendment to the BOCC ordinance 001-2001.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. What's the board's pleasure? Short break?
I think 5 minutes before we start into this next three.
Okay, George?
Yeah.
Good, let's take 5 minutes. Thank you, grassroots.
property is within a rockfall hazard area. So the applicant has submitted this request based on that denial and contending that the denial constitutes a taking and denies reasonable use and economic return on the property. So as I said, Glenn's, the applicant's position, I'll let him discuss and is provided for you in the application. Just a few issues, I guess, on our end for community development. Just to speak a little bit to those prior approvals and how we got to a place where there have been so many approvals and now we had a denial on the same property for an issue that had been come up in the past. And I think as far as I can tell, going back through all of those, it goes back to the old code. So prior to 1994, the code actually did have language at that time that said development is prohibited in rockfall hazard areas. I think the extent of the analysis at the time was less extensive than what we get now through our review processes. And also the code was written differently at that time where there wasn't this provision where if development is denied, then you go to a takings and then proceed. A lot of things, even though development was prohibited in a certain area, development may have been approved under that code because there was an acknowledgement in that process without going through a takings that development could be approved with mitigation. So essentially, we created a new step in 1994, which was the takings process. If something got denied, then it could go through that process. So I think a lot of the older approvals went back to a time when something did get approved with rockfall and said, we'll do more analysis when it gets to building permit. And then further approvals, I think, just built on that same premise that we would get the detailed analysis of the mitigation when the building permit was submitted, which is what happened in 2008. They provided all of the detailed analyses, the mitigation plan for rockfall and walls that would protect the residents, and that was all approved at the time, went through, the building permit was issued, and again, that did expire. So technically reading the very strict language of the code, it says development is prohibited in the rockfall hazard area. So I think taking the fresh look this time under our code, we said we can't really go back to, well, we did it in the past, so we can just do it again. We need to take the appropriate steps that are laid out in the code. So, so we made the finding of the denial, and I guess to then go from there. Given that, we feel that the denial of the development would deny all reasonable use and economic return on the property. There is no area on the property that avoids rockfall hazard, so this is not a circumstance where we're trying to look for something that does avoid it. The experts have confirmed that the entire property is affected, and the applicant has demonstrated that the hazard can be mitigated through construction of the rockfall barrier that's been designed by a qualified professional engineer, so it would meet that standard. So we've recommended that you find that a taking has occurred, and as our sort of process usually proceeds with this, if you make that finding today, then we would bring back a resolution for you that would remediate that taking and approve development with subject to conditions on the property.
Thanks, Suzanne. Any comments, discussion?
I just have a question, just to clarify. If we approve that a takings has occurred, that doesn't necessarily prohibit the applicant to go ahead and build on that property. They just have to address the mitigation.
Essentially, if you find a takings, and then the direction would be to staff to remediate that, it is via the conditions would address the appropriate mitigation for that. So the mitigation becomes part of the conditions of approval.
Okay. And then, if we do approve a building permit for this, and mitigation is going to occur, but when I was reading through some of the notes from some of the engineers, even though they commented on the ability to mitigate, they did not take any liability for their recommendations. So they said this is what should be done, but we're not going to be liable if something goes haywire. And I guess, would the county have any liability once we issue this permit, and then is it up to the homeowner that they're going to assume the responsibility and they're going to do the mitigation, but if something does go wrong down the road because we've issued that permit, or is the county liable at all?
Ordinarily not. Typically, when we release the permit and the approval, there'll be a disclaimer referencing the development hazards, and there will only be a release of the permit upon a submission for a permit permit application of an engineer's signed statement or a report or opinion on the development of the property. So basically, under the engineer's seal, whoever that is, the permit would issue.
And then if it is a takings, in terms of our ability to determine where that building site might be, do we also have the ability to look at the size of that house as well? I know we've discussed this in other cases where we've decided to limit the size of a house because of the danger of rockfall.
The answer is yes, provided the restriction relates to the hazard.
Okay.
John, would that not be all determined in the remediation and the investigation that staff will do with the applicant?
Yes.
Okay. And the disclaimer would show up in the resolution, or in what kind of document?
It would be on the site plan and anywhere else, Suzanne?
It's always on the site plan.
Okay. Just for a matter of record, I wanted to make sure where it was. Rachel?
Yeah, it's kind of a follow-up along the same lines. I was wondering, how is notice really given to future potential owners? We understand the current owners of the property would be well aware of this, they're going through this process and everything. But if the property were to change hands 2-3 times, 20 years in the future, how do we make sure there's not, quote, an unsuspecting buyer who doesn't realize that there is a rockfall hazard, there has been mitigation put in place, but, mitigation is mitigation, it's never a guarantee. How does it live on in terms of future buyers being aware? Not that many necessarily go back to the site plan or the building permit to review that notation.
I mean, that's essentially, these are all recorded documents. There would be recorded approvals, the recorded site plan. I mean, it's kind of, I guess, just part of the due diligence of purchasing a property is that all of those show up on the title and are identified as.
So they should live on in the title.
So that's how it.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Any further questions of Suzanne? Glenn, please introduce yourself and your project.
All right, thank you. My name is Glenn Horn, for the record, and I represent Aspen Beaver Pond LLC, and that entity is Rick Manaway and his wife Lisa. It's been set up for their estate planning purposes, but they're the owners of the property and they came in for the hearing. And I don't really need to go into all kinds of detail. I just want to kind of hit the high points on this. Suzanne's already touched upon one of the critical factors in terms of how this got approved originally, and it was a product of the old code, the 77 and 94 code. And under that code, there was no provision for takings. And what happened a lot of times in those years was that the board thought through, well, if we deny this, it's probably going to be a takings. Therefore, we need to look at what is the adequate mitigation. That was a standard practice. And then when that code was rewritten in 94, the board at the time gave specific direction that they wanted a prohibition clause in the code, and the county attorney at that time directed that there be a takings provision in the code. As a matter of fact, that went in right before the 94 code, at the end of the 77 and 94 code, where the takings provision went into the code. So that is some background on how it occurred. I want to just orient you a little bit about where we are so you're familiar with this site. This is an ortho photo from the GIS department. There's the Roaring Fork River, and this is North Star right here. Highway 82, this is Mountain Valley. This is the first house on the left after Mountain Valley. Second house is right here. And then you've got, actually the second house is here, third house is here, and then this is the Mattaway property. And one thing that's interesting, this was taken from an airplane, and you can see this is the flat part of the property in the sun, and then in the shadows you see the steep hillside above it. So it's the flat land right at the base well, that's the side of Smuggler Mountain, right across from North Star. The paragliders and parasailers land right about here, to give you a sense of where it is. So it's pretty close to town, about a mile from town. This is a picture, two pictures I took yesterday. You might recognize this. Jim Eigelhardt's sign is right there. This is the driveway. There was a building permit issued. Jim was going to start construction for Rick and Lisa, and then the recession came and they really weren't able to follow through, and the building permit expired. Here's some of Jim's materials that were there when he initiated the setup for construction. So that gives you an idea of what it looks like. Oops. Suzanne touched upon this a little bit. This site, and it's a 3.3 acre site. It used to be part of Jimmy Smith's ranch, and the sites on the left side of Highway 82 as you're going up the pass, most of those properties were part of the Smith Ranch when he owned it before North Star. And Highway 82 subdivided these lots off. Almost all of them have been developed. They're suitable for development, with adequate mitigation. And this one, Suzanne walked you through some of the things in red. That's the activity envelope. This is the proposed driveway, and the driveway is in for the most part. In black here, you've got an envelope and a second envelope. Those are soil nail envelopes, where when you put in horizontal bolts for retaining walls. We've gotten in the practice of creating envelopes for them because there have been instances where people have soil nailed right off their property into a neighbor's property. So the Community Development Department said, let's create a soil nail envelope to make sure that we know that the bolts you put in, the horizontal bolts, retaining walls, stay on your own property. One of them up here on Red Mountain went right under the county road, and it became a big issue. So that's just the background what those are. This area in blue, that's an existing man-made pond. And in the packet, if you look through either mine or Suzanne's, it mentions that one of the things is we determined that this entire area is subject to rockfall, and the question came up, well, what if you drain the man-made pond and put the house over in the pond? Would that be safer? So we had the geologists look at that at Suzanne's request, and the answer was that wouldn't work either, because even the man-made pond is subject to rockfall. So we've really looked at all portions of the site. We also looked at the other geologic hazards, steep slopes. We avoided the steep slopes. There's debris flow and avalanche hazards were addressed. And we'll get into this more in the remediation hearing. But there is a ridge right here that comes down on the property, and it's pretty prominent when you're out there. And it's fortunate that this ridge right here separates debris flow and also avalanche danger naturally from going across that little ridge to this site. So the only geologic hazards on this property are steep slopes, which we've avoided, and the rockfall danger, which we can't. And another important point that we want to stress is that the geologic hazard that affects this property, the rockfall, does not reach Highway 82. And the mitigation that we've put in doesn't have any adverse impact on the other properties. In other words, we're not diverting these rocks from this property, to Highway 82 or to a neighbor's property. So we're taking care of all of the hazards on this property without endangering the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Okay, this board is kind of a chronological history of what occurred. It started in 91 under the 77 and 94 code, as Suzanne explained. That was the approval that was granted to Sally Hansen. And when that approval was granted, there were reports from Nick Lamperis, Art Mears, and Larry Doble, all saying that the hazard could be mitigated, and it was the sort of thing that could be dealt with at building permit. Those reports were reviewed by Jeff Hines, who is the state geologist for the state of Colorado, and he said, yes, it's true, these things can be mitigated, it can be dealt with at building permit. So that stayed in effect for a while, and then in 2004, right here, Juliet Shields was the owner, and there was another 1041 approval, and they reached the same conclusions, and there was in fact a condition: take care of this rockfall mitigation issue at building permit. And that was in effect when Rick and Lisa bought the property in 2006. They bought the property for $4.1 million, and they looked at these past approvals, and they were conscientious, concerned buyers that looked at the record to see what was there, and they saw that there were 1041s. They were aware of the condition that they had to deal with rockfall mitigation at building permit, and that didn't concern Rick and Lisa that much. What did concern them was the dog prohibition on the property. So you can see in 2006 there was a minor amendment, and that's what the prior owner did as a contingency for the sale, so that Rick and Lisa were assured that they could have their dogs there, and the restriction was changed. So in 2006, in red here, you can see they bought the property, and they went about doing what was necessary to build their house. They went through a scenic review and designed the house. They got scenic approval, and this is typical of the code and also their preferences, that based on scenic review, the house was pushed as far back from the road as possible at the toe of the slope, so there would be less visual impacts from Highway 82. They did all of the mitigation work that was necessary, hiring Ye and Associates, the geologists that designed their mitigation. They came up with the mitigation plan, and we realized that the mitigation plan required these rockfall barrier walls, where there would have to be these horizontal soil-nailed bolts that went into the cut behind their house to hold the wall up. And that's where the thing came up about you need to have these soil nail mitigation envelopes. Those were those black envelopes we put on in there. So we went back in 2008 and got an approval for these rockfall mitigation horizontal soil nailing walls. And that was the approval that they got. They really weren't worried about getting a vested property right at that time. It was just a minor amendment to a development permit because they were vested, and they figured, well, we're just going to come right in for a building permit, which they did. So we didn't bother going through the publication process to get a vested property right prior to the building permit, because they submitted right away for the building permit in 2008. And that was right about when the recession changed, the financial capability of Rick and Lisa to build at that time. They just couldn't pull it off. They didn't want the permit to expire, but they just didn't have the resources to do it at that time. So in 2009, right here, the permit expired, and Rick and Lisa didn't have vested property rights anymore, so we submitted for a new activity envelope site plan review and scenic review in 2010, and that's kind of worked its way through the process. We looked at all the rockfall hazards, and Suzanne and Lance said, given the code, their hands are tied. They couldn't approve the application as submitted because of the provision in the code about no development of rockfall hazard area, and we knew we had this opportunity to come for a takings hearing, and Rick and Lisa treated it very seriously because they have so much invested in this that they invested based upon the approvals in place. They've spent over $200,000 on architectural plans for their house, the engineering plans, the rockfall mitigation. They've got all this money into the lot, and so that brings us to the takings consideration hearing. And the reason why we did such a big fat book for you was just in the event that things didn't go well, we wanted to create the public record. So with that, that's kind of the background of what occurred. Rick and Lisa are here, Mark's here representing them, Mark Hamilton, and I wanted to ask Rick if he's got anything that he would like to add, and then Mark as well.
Sir, would you do us a favor? We'll certainly allow you to speak, but identify yourself for the record.
Sure. I'll kind of briefly, and if you don't mind, again, my name is Rick Mattaway. This is my wife, Lisa. And we have been coming to Aspen for, our oldest son is
Almost
19, so for the last 17 years, we've spent, the first time 17 years ago, we came when he was 2, we came for 2 weeks, and after that, every year we came, we stayed longer until we decided it's time to buy a house here, which we did. We bought in 2000, we bought a half duplex in the West End on 7th and Smuggler, because we loved the music festival, I especially. And then as the next years went by, we decided, hey, I think when the kids are off in college, Aspen's going to be our home. So we looked for and found this piece of property to build our dream house on, and you've heard the rest of the history.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Glenn, are you having a presentation?
Anything to add, Mark?
Mark, do us a favor. Identify yourself.
Sure. Thank you.
So Lindy knows who's speaking when.
Mark Hamilton, an attorney with Holland Hart, representing the Mattaways. Basically, I just reiterate that we concur entirely with Suzanne's overview. With regard to Rachel's question about notice, we concur that there would be recorded documentation in the record to ensure that any subsequent purchaser would have notice of the rockfall hazard and the required mitigation. We concur that the land use code, with regard to prohibiting development in rockfall areas, has really been more or less the same since 1977, in my opinion. What's changed is you used to have a denial followed by mitigation, whereas now you have to go to a takings hearing before you can go to mitigation. So that's where we are procedurally. And without repeating anyone here, I guess I would just reiterate there's no dispute, there's nothing here to suggest that the hazard cannot be mitigated, but unless the board approves our takings request, no structures at all can be built on the property, and no meaningful use can be made of the property. Finally, I would mention that in my view, this is not a situation where the board should be concerned about a bad precedent. This is truly a unique situation where the totality of the circumstances, I think, just require a takings finding. 100% of the property is impacted. There is no way to change the proposal in a way to get out of the way of the hazard. That is simply 100% impact. As Glenn mentioned, there are no neighbors affected by the hazard, nor is Highway 82. And the site-specific work, as Glenn mentioned in the past, the board often would issue approvals that were contingent upon a certain level of site-specific engineering and building permit. And in this case, that actually happened. The building permit was issued after that work occurred, providing additional assurance that mitigation is feasible and reasonable here. So I guess I just conclude by reiterating our request that the board determine and confirm that there's been a takings in this situation, or would be if relief were not granted, and that we could proceed forward with the remediation hearing at whatever the date that we talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, does that conclude your...
Yes.
Board, do we have any questions, comments, discussion here? Rachel?
Yeah, just had a comment, Glenn, more than anything. I'm realizing there's no apples to apples in land use, but I seem to recall a takings hearing in Swiss, was it Swiss Village or in the Redstone area that you represented someone a few years back, and suggested the same sort of thing with large pictures of rocks on the site and saying that, this whole site's a rockfall, and so therefore it should be a TDR. And then this time it's, yes, there's rockfall on the whole site, but there is mitigation. And I'm kind of wondering, how you make which call.
Well, in the case, there were two in the Crystal that we did. One was Country River Estates in Swiss Village, and the deal there was the size of the rocks in relationship to the size of the parcel. and then we had no place to go with respect to mitigation, plus the rocks were much bigger, and the structural mitigation that would be required wasn't feasible given the size of the rocks. That was the principal difference. And here, you're not dealing with rocks of the same size.
Thank you. I appreciate the backgrounding as we do look forward to future precedents.
You know, on the rocks, I think I remember somewhere in this packet, 1 or 2 pages in, there were a couple of large rocks that really stood out. Would part of that mitigation be to actually remove those rocks and get them out of the way so they don't pose any further hazards?
You know, I read the different geologists. You know, you've had 2 state geologists, and then there were, I think, 4 different private geologists, and they had different approaches. But all of them said that if you could stabilize the rocks up in place somehow, or if you go and push them off, that would be the best situation, because then they wouldn't come down, you wouldn't rely on structural mitigation. The problem you run into is if you go and push them off, you create a really dangerous situation. You probably have to shut down the highway and make sure that everything's safe. And then also to get up there to do it, you're on a really steep slope, so it's impractical to get up there. And some of those rocks are above this property because it's only 3 acres in size. So you'd be up on federal land up there, and I don't know what kind of federal permitting would be required. So that's why that wasn't really a practical way to go. And we ended up looking at the structural mitigation, but it was the ideal solution according to some of those geologists.
So, but I thought one of the other solutions was to provide netting. And if you provide netting on that, you would still have to deal with public lands?
Well, you can also do those barouche netting down below, the really thick cables that they're using. They use them on Shadow Mountain. So walls or netting are ways to go. To do the netting up at the source, you have to have heavy equipment drive in these big steel piles to hook the netting to. We recently did one in Castle Creek just a few months ago where they did the steel netting, and there are aesthetic issues involved, especially in the scenic corridor, about using steel netting, and it's not my favorite thing to look at. The ones that I've seen are not that attractive.
It's also an issue, too, about that type of mitigation would have to happen on the steep slope above the site. So you'd be getting into development on slopes of over 30%. So not even at the source, but even just if it was just above the home site, you would be on that very steep slope.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the board's in-depth questioning, because part of what we do here, obviously, is health, safety, and welfare, and there is a concern, and it's somewhat comforting to know that, well, this would be documented, and but it is a hazard nonetheless. Well, we're in a process of not making a judgment per se, to eliminate the hazard. That probably is not going to happen. I have one question, though, on the dog restriction, and looking at item 8 as the attachments. Did the DOW, Glenn, I assume you'd maybe be familiar, did the DOW recommend that there not be dogs previously? Do you have any history for us?
I don't have the history on that. I didn't do the review at that time. I started working for Rick and Lisa after that. So I don't know whether they did. Do you know, Suzanne or Rick?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know, anytime anyone comes to us with a request to eliminate a dog prohibition, we would review it with the Division of Wildlife. And, the code has changed over time in terms of in what areas we prohibit dogs and where we just require kenneling. So I don't know the specific, I don't remember the specifics on this one, but I'm
and this appears to be just in 2004 was the hearing officer's determination, and then, of course, it says here, condition 10A of hearing officer's determination shall be rescinded and reinstated to say, with regards to dog, applicant can comply with a section of the code, so they're consistent.
Yeah,
with the code.
I remember now when I was reading the record, I don't recall whether there was anything in there from the Division of Wildlife, but I remember seeing something that Jonathan Loski wrote at the time, because he was the the county wildlife official. So for the remediation hearing, we can check all that out and see what occurred.
Yeah, I believe that if we've made a finding here, and essentially rescinded and restated, that I'm comfortable, but I wanted to try to get a little history, because in all the time I've been around, even on P&Z, I've never seen where it was rescinded and restated. So, if you find that easily and it's presentable at some time in the future, it might help educate us, but it's not a matter of deep importance. Any other, Rachel?
Yeah, I had just one or two kind of questions to make sure I understand the sequence. Should the takings determination go forward, then there would be a remediation plan and decision by staff, and we would see that again as kind of a final.
It would be a resolution, right?
It'd be a resolution.
Bring back a resolution
Okay.
for you.
Okay, but with a staff recommendation and review of that. Then this would be approved under the new code. The new permits would be under the new code, and it would naturally vest for 3 years going forward, so wouldn't require immediate construction or anything like that. Under the new code, would the site be reviewed for the stream margin setback then? And would this comply with the 100 feet setback from the Roaring Fork?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no issue with.
Okay, and that code does not relate to any sort of man-made ponds?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to kind of go through that sequence. Thank you.
Thank you. John Ely, question. In order to move this forward, does the board have to make a finding that a takings has occurred?
Yes.
Is that the proper sequence? Okay. Seeing no further comments, questions, feedback, I would like to request a motion to move this forward by anyone.
I would make a motion to acknowledge the rockfall hazard throughout the entire site of the Mattaway property and approve the Aspen Beaver Pond LLC request for takings determination.
Second.
Good.
Is that sufficient for the record?
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for stepping up to the process.
Glenn, do you want to hold on to these for your next... I've got piles of paperwork at home.
I can't even fit this one on my desk.
I was going to try to download it on an iPad, but I decided not.
The Britannica is going away. This is the Britannica land. Okay, so government.
I'll be back in just 1 second.
Last week, we're going to just take 3, at most 5-minute break. Thanks very much. Thank
It was a 7-year vested right at the time, so a longer than usual vested right at that time. There were several items that had to be completed before development could proceed, including a scenic review for the driveway, which was done, and then the driveway was then built. And then the applicant submitted for the scenic view protection review for the residents, which came in last fall. While that was, a neighbor objected to that, or several neighbors objected to that, so the process started to slow down, and the applicant got nervous that they would be able to get through that process and prepare their building permit application and be ready to submit prior to that expiration date. So they put in this application to extend the vested rights. Meanwhile, since that came in, the hearing officer did approve the scenic view protection review for the residents. So that has happened, and then the applicant has come in and submitted their building permit application. It's our policy that once we have accepted a complete building permit application prior to that vesting expiration date, that gives the applicant the right to undertake and complete the development under the terms and conditions of the site-specific development plan, subject to compliance with the building code. So basically, as long as they get in their application in, building permit application in prior to that date, they are good to move forward with that plan. So based on that, we recommend that you deny the request for a vesting extension. We see no need for it. The building permit is in process and has met our deadline or internal, meets our standards in terms of how we then address this, that it would not be subject to changes in the code since it is in that building permit process now.
It's consistent with policy.
So yes, it is consistent with how we operate. So that's our recommendation.
Yeah, Suzanne, if you could outline I'm sure you could, if you will, outline the next steps that continue to keep the building permit alive. As I understand it, when certain actions or inspections are taken.
Right.
Okay, what would
So since they've submitted, they have a year, I'll keep looking at Lance to make sure he nods his head while I go. They have a year to have that permit issued. So basically, it can be reviewed, approved, but then within a year, they have to come pick it up. Okay. And then from a year from that date, they must have obtained their first inspection. Generally, that's, I think, a foundation or some sort of...
Yes. It's not just excavation, they actually have to have a foundation inspection.
And then from there on out, you're on a 6-month time frame to have inspections that demonstrate that progress is being made on that permit.
Okay, thank you.
George.
So, Suzanne, I guess I'm a little confused. What you're saying is the applicant came forward asking for a 1-year vesting. What you're saying in ComDev, they've already actually met the requirements, so there's not a need for an extension of the vesting. So unless the applicant has something we don't know, why is this coming forward to us then?
Maybe you want Mitch to respond to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass that question.
Yeah, hold on just one second. Any other questions? Mitch, would you mind answering that with your presentation? Introduce yourself, please.
For the record, my name is Mitch Haas. I'm a planner representing the owner of this property, which is Government 33 LLC. This is a very odd one, and this is the first time I think I've ever had to say this, or probably the last time I'll ever say we're perfectly fine with the staff recommendation of denial here. Why are we still doing this? Why haven't we withdrawn this? Basically, we were trying to get something in writing that confirmed the building permit application having been accepted is also the same as it having been deemed complete, and also confirms the vested rights. I was unable to get that in writing, but this resolution does that, so we're happy to take the denial resolution.
Thank you.
This should be quick then.
Well, we're rolling down the road too fast here. I've got to ask a question. Because it appears that there were some objections for neighbors, and I understand what we're doing and your explanation, but what was the objections? What were the objections of the neighbors? Was it scenic?
Not so much scenic, because the scenic route review process from the highway. Their objections, concerns were, and there was a concern when this was originally approved about impacts of construction and afterwards building on a very steep slope. Is this going to create any sort of rockfall hazard? We actually had some fairly unusual conditions. These were actually 2 side-by-side lots that included conditions requiring that the neighbors be insured when they went to building permit. So if there was, any impact, there was insurance for that. And there's also there is a small, rockfall retaining wall essentially running along the lower side of the driveway to try and catch anything that might get dislodged during construction. But essentially through the hearing officer review, the applicant was able to demonstrate that the way they are retaining this structure and dealing with that was satisfactory to the neighbors and then also to the hearing officer. So their concerns were addressed through that process.
Yeah, good. Please do.
Yeah, as you know, as Mitch knows, I never like the idea of extending vesting. So in this case, we're on the same page. Great, so I'd like to make a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners, Pickens County, Colorado, denying the Government 33 LLC extension of vested real property rights.
Second.
Well, I guess we can't do anything but move forward. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you.
Always talk more if you want.
Well, we'll not take your packet next time.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Okay, Dale, would you come up? Our next item is an ordinance authorizing Gold Butte property acquisition. And obviously, we need some discussion here.
I'll let you have the table.
Dale, please introduce the topic.
Sure.
Yourself.
I'm Dale Will, Director of Pickens County Open Space and Trails, and somewhat unusual for me to be here in the land use agenda. The way it's come about is that there was a proposed major plat amendment on the Red Butte Ranch, and the piece of it that Open Space got involved in had to do with a proposed conveyance of some property to the open space program. There's a conservation easement that is not an issue, but what has become an issue are two climbing areas where the agreement in the resolution approving was that these two places, one being Gold Butte and the other has a terrible name, Sewer Falls, would be conveyed to Pickens County. And when these land use dedications come about, the county has a policy that the department that's going to be responsible for looking after whatever the property being dedicated is needs to be involved in the way that the conveyance is done. So in this case, community development asked for open space to be involved in sort of the transactional steps of consummating what are elements of a land use approval. And really the impasse we've come to, and I was just having a little conversation with her, but some of it may be based on some misapprehensions or different interpretations of a proposed deed, but the impasse really boils down to our concern that if we have a piece of land that's held by Pickens County, we have a ranger program that's fairly well established. John Armstrong is well known in the community as our lead ranger that regulates the public uses on the properties. And where I got stuck and where the Open Space Board really got stuck is in language on the deed that was proposed by Herb that said that Pickens County would be responsible for enforcing the limits on public use here at Gold Butte and at Sewer Falls, but that the former owner of the property would also have a right of enforcement. And I think that's basically the way it's described, as a right of enforcement, and it goes on to talk about injunctive relief and so forth. We have had some bad experiences in other situations where public rights that are granted as a result of land use dedications have been difficult to utilize because of the less than friendly interactions between the public seeking to use these things and some land managers. Doesn't involve this property, but partly as a consequence of that experience, we want to have our own relationship with our own public and not be sharing that job with what in this case would be the former owners of the two pieces of property in question. I think if we can solve that fundamental issue, that the rest of the negotiation of this deed will be doable. What I have put together, it's a very unusual procedural
context where this is really the type of a follow-up on a land use approval that would normally be done at the staff level, but because we reached an impasse on the language in this deed, there was no clear precedent for how this would come back to you all. So we kind of contrived this ordinance authorizing the acquisition. Now, the ordinance would be required in any event, but we're bringing that back to you without a recommendation to approve the actual deed in question so that you can weigh in, and there's perhaps an issue about exactly what was intended by the original land use approval, and specifically where it describes the conveyance of this property. As I explained in the memo, for us the customary understanding of the word conveyance of a fee simple absolute interest in property is that it's conveyed to a new owner and the new owner takes over the administration of it. And I find that this reservation of an enforcement right back to the prior owner really compromises the nature of the property that I believe was contemplated when this approval was granted, and that was the view of the Open Space and Trails Board as well. So that's why I'm here, and that's where I think we're stuck.
Yeah, thanks. And question, the Red Butte Ranch major plat amendment that we all did, which I think shifted some home sites, etc., and it was somewhat lengthy, but at the end of the day, when there was a discussion that these two recreation areas, we'll put that in quotes, were to come to the county, that was offered by the applicant, correct? Of free will. I mean, it wasn't a requirement or anything. Okay, just to clarify for the record. Board, any questions of Dale before we go to her? George?
I've got a couple of questions. So, just to clarify, we're at a point now, I know there were several different requests by the owner before this conveyance of this land should take place. And it seems like a lot of them are now you're comfortable with, Dale. One was the opportunity for fencing, the owner to do some fencing. Another was to limit the use, and it's limit the use for rock climbing by members of the public, for passive interpretive educational activities and wildlife protection, and for the trail users established below the long established trails within the parcel 1. But it also talks about prohibiting dogs as well as loud noise and things like that. So that's all sort of been addressed. The last little sticking point is what you brought up, is in terms of the owner asking or assuming that he has a right for the reservation of enforcement rights onto this parcel.
That's essentially correct. I need to be careful here because when we took this to the Open Space Board, they took the position on that, whereas the resolution of approval talked about a conveyance of the property, they felt that we're able to adopt whatever restrictions are needed and that they were not interested in seeing those put in the deed. My opinion as director of the program is that that's perhaps overly cautious. I've seen the county accept some deed restrictions in the past on donations of land, and to be sure that I'm guessing correctly where the Open Space Board's real issue is, one thing you might want to do if you're inclined to move forward today is refer this back to them, depending on where we come out on the pivotal issue as I see it, which again is this question of who regulates the public uses.
Can I follow up? Dale, how many rangers do you have on staff?
We have 2 during the winter and full complement of 4 during the summer.
And what sort of roles and responsibilities or capacities do they have in terms of enforcement?
They're specifically authorized to enforce Title 12 of the Pitkin County Code, which includes a lot of general restrictions on the use of public open space And it also includes any special restrictions that are created as a result of management plans for specific properties. So, for example, with something like this, our custom would be not to open it to public use until we had a management plan in place. The management plans can impose limits on public use that are more restrictive than the general limits in the county code. The rangers are able to enforce both those things. In addition, the rangers are tied into the dispatch operations with the sheriff's office, and if they find themselves in a situation where either the nature of the public contact seems to be becoming volatile, or if they witness things that are not legal but are outside the purview of the building regulations per se, then they call backup, and they have a pretty good relationship with the sheriff's office for those kinds of things.
So I guess that my question, you can answer this later on or whenever, is I really don't understand why the owner would want to put any of their employees at risk, because they haven't got experience in law enforcement. They don't have the relationship with our sheriff's department. They haven't got the experience in terms of actually managing public lands. And so I really don't understand where the paranoia is of your client wishing to take that responsibility on himself, where we have shown through our management plan and through our ranger program how we're able to monitor and protect these properties that are adjacent to private lands.
Yeah. Seeing no further questions, comments?
I have a question, but
Go ahead.
we'll just let that question stand for the applicant.
Yeah, let's let that, so we don't go back and forth.
I guess I wanted to ask, and this may go to John Ely and staff as much as to Dale, but if we're not able to solve this impasse, does this rescind the rest of the land use action? Or can we take an action to rescind the major plat amendment?
I was looking for the exact language of the previous resolution that said this remains. I can't find it. Trustee Alcott.
I mean, right now, it's all tied together with recordation of the plat, the conservation easement, this deed of conveyance. I don't know if that's what we can do those.
So perhaps in layman's terms, although we made the determination and agreed to this major plat amendment, relocation of the sites, new driveway cut, things like that, it is not really final until a plat is recorded. And when will that time period expire? Did this have 10-year vesting?
Suzanne, the plat, there's not a
the plat, there's not a time requirement on the plat per se. I'd have to look again to see what the vesting is. I mean, it didn't have an extended vested right.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, the documents associated with finalizing all of this were submitted. It's about a year ago now, I guess.
It's a while.
Were submitted to us for review. So, including the plat, all of those various documents that we record together. So essentially, again, I'd have to look, but they've met the deadline there of at least bringing things in for us to review and try and finalize, and then this issue came up and has held up that process.
So until it is finalized, there would be, at the very least, no ability to issue permits for the new driveway construction or to market or sell the lots or anything?
Without this approval, right, without that plat, they have their prior approvals still intact.
Okay. Thank you. And then, again, just kind of wondering, what is there any ability for the board to rescind a previous resolution, a previous ordinance? Can that be a staff-initiated activity? Can it be a board-initiated activity?
My understanding of the code is that there has to be a finding of a violation of a condition. Is that. Correct.
Yeah, there's nothing in the code that's, the land use code that specifically states that the board at its discretion may revoke, or that within a certain time period, if there's not action, the board could revoke. We've talked about having such a provision.
So I have to say, this is really particularly troubling to me when it seemed we went through very lengthy hearings on this plat amendment, and we conducted site visits and heard a lot of testimony. The relocation of the driveway, the encroachment of the new lots on Deer Hill was really quite controversial in the community and was opposed by a number of people. It was not a unanimous vote on our board. And then by leaving certain elements to be worked through with staff, perhaps we as a board are placing an undue burden on our staff to be our negotiators when it seems like this is going to be a fairly straightforward conveyance. We got the terms that's in the approval reprinted on our page, and then it just doesn't happen, and so the public kind of loses what was offered to them and was the benefit that I think certainly swayed a number of people's minds on this board in terms of the vote. And so it just raises a question in future situations. You just put something on hold for 6 or 8 months, or continue and not make a final determination for the applicant until they're able to reach dotted I's and cross T's on all these accompanying documents. So I'm just kind of concerned about that, and I'll have a couple questions for you, Herb.
I'd like to hear from the applicant first.
Good. Herb, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Herb Klein, attorney here in town representing the owners of the Red Butte Ranch, the Hearst family. Just as some background, as part of our original development application, we offered to convey to the county a pond. There's a large pond that sits along the Rio Grande Trail, and about half that pond is in the county and half of it is within the ranch. So we thought it might be a nice community benefit to offer that voluntarily. Jack, as you said, it was voluntary. Maybe for picnicking, fishing, something like that. In response to that, as part of the referral process, the Open Space Board responded and said that they weren't that crazy about the pond, but they really thought that rock climbing and ice climbing areas that are on either end of the ranch might be a pretty good public benefit. So we looked at that and considered it with those uses in mind and agreed to it. It really wasn't controversial. We went through a fairly easy process defining the boundaries of those areas. And when the time came for preparing the final documents, I submitted a deed that had what I thought, and I think most people would think, were very reasonable conditions. We were by no means trying to throw a wrench into this thing. It never occurred to us that they would be controversial. I worked with Dale back. We got word initially through Suzanne that the Open Space Board or the Open Space staff was not happy with some of these provisions. And I had a couple of conversations with Dale, and we sent back and forth some red lines, and had what I thought, and I don't want to speak for Dale, but it was my impression, he thought were reasonable provisions. We did have a discussion about this enforcement issue because it wasn't quite clear. We thought that was going to end up on John Ewley's desk ultimately, so we thought we'd leave that kind of simple, put the issue, the point in there, and then leave it to John and I to work out some of the details. Dale then took that revised deed to the board, the Open Space Board, and then reported back to me that the Open Space Board said they would not accept any conditions on the deed. None. That they just wanted a flat-out conveyance. We were very surprised. We thought that was inappropriate. We thought it was unreasonable. And we just kind of left it at that. I mean, the feeling was that at some point, and I'm just trying to be frank with you, the feeling was that at some point, somebody would want these rock climbing areas, and perhaps in a context where the county came to us, what's going on, we want to get these things conveyed, or possibly some pressure from the climbing community, we would then have a forum to discuss this. I was leaving one thing out. We did have an interim discussion with staff about how to bring this to you rather than waiting. And what we heard was that it needed to come in the form of an amendment to our approvals. And we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to go through that kind of process. So we waited. George, I know, has heard from people in the community about trying to get this thing done. And George, thank you for, I know you communicated with him at one point, and that has kind of stimulated our effort today. So we think our provisions are reasonable, and I'm gratified to hear from Dale that he feels that most of them will be acceptable now. It's the first time I've heard this since I heard that the Open Space Board basically shut us down, and maybe we ought to focus on the enforcement issue. George, there is not and never has been any contemplation of having a private ranger outfit going on there. That, I don't know where Dale got that impression. I don't believe there's anything I ever said. It's certainly nothing that's been contemplated or discussed. We simply, we were told that the Open Space Board has their guidelines that they impose on most open space properties, and our provisions are very similar to those guidelines. The reason we wanted a private right of enforcement is twofold. Number one, open space could either decide not to enforce those or could change them. They can change their own management plan, their own management guidelines at will. We wanted to have some very basic restrictions and conditions on the use that if the Open Space Board or county didn't enforce, or if they changed their management plans, at least the owner would know that he had the ability to enforce them. It's important because at both ends of the ranch, there's a lot platted that's right next to the Sewer Falls rock climbing area, and there's an existing lot with residents on it that's right next to the Gold Hill rock climbing area. So we're very concerned about noise, trespass, things like that. We didn't want this to be something that would kind of come back to bite the owner or subsequent owners. So that's kind of where we are. And so far as the enforcement, I think and we can write this in, but I think realistically, the way it would probably play out is that if there were repeated violations, let's say it's a ban against amplified music. If there were repeated violations, and we had contacted the county and the Open Space Board and said, please enforce this, and after a couple of times they didn't, then we as the owner, we're not talking about going and handing people citations, we would file a lawsuit, and we would ask the court to enjoin the offending uses, and then there'd be a court order. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, it is possible that we could, if there were somebody, let's say there's some nut job out there who's just got some thing about being a nuisance, we could sue that person in particular. That's kind of the extent of the enforcement action that we had contemplated. It was certainly not an active, ranger type operation. That was never even contemplated or discussed. So I think if you took a look at the restrictions in the deed, and if Dale's memo, by the way, one other thing that he mentions is something about the trail uses, where we said that the trail uses, it says that they be regulated by the grantee, by the county, according to its Title 12 of the code. And we said that if there was any conflict between that and these, there would be the more restrictive regulations that apply. But the trail uses section was in there to acknowledge that there are some existing trail easements through this area, and they're unrelated to the climbing activities. So we didn't want to leave that unaddressed because we didn't want to create the impression that somehow the restriction that this only be used for climbing and these other educational and wildlife activities We didn't want to create the impression that those trail uses would somehow not be allowed. So that's in there more to acknowledge that those are permitted rather than as a restriction. And by the way, in the back and forth with Dale, we did agree to expand the uses beyond rock climbing and ice climbing to what we're calling passive interpretive educational activities and wildlife protection. Because we can see that there might be some, Dale pointed out, I think correctly, there could be some benefit if there's a geology class or something about wildlife. It could be a nice area where you could have some school groups or things like that going on there. But we want to protect the privacy of the adjacent residences. We don't want to see this turn into kind of the X Games of rock climbing. And there's nothing in these provisions that in any way restricts or limits the intended uses. And again, please understand that we're coming to you in the context of being told that the Open Space Board would not accept any restriction on this property.
Thank you. George?
Well, thanks, Herb. And I know that it's going back and forth because we got to a point now where I think I'm pretty comfortable. My only concern is under G, and maybe a clarification in terms of the wording for that, where it says grantors shall also have the right to enforce these restrictions. Because, again, your client is conveying this land to the public. And once that land is conveyed to a public entity, then the owner releases their responsibility, their liability, and their enforcement capabilities. That's sort of a normal course. I think, again, I'm not sure where the paranoia comes from in terms of enforcement. Your owner certainly has the ability to contact the sheriff's department if he feels that any of these provisions are being abused. Certainly has the ability to come not only to open space, but to the BOCC, who actually makes the final decisions in all these cases. The open space is just recommends whatever they're doing, and the BOCC makes those final decisions. So you've got an avenue going directly to the commissioners for any of your concerns. So I'm still not clear on why this needs to be in here, or we can try to refine this wording so it's going to be comfortable to address what you believe are the owner's rights, but what we believe is the responsibility for the public. And in terms of enforcement, worrying about whether the ranger will be able to enforce some loud noise, you just have to look at the enforcement that our rangers do in terms of collecting dog poop up Smuggler Mountain, which is a much larger issue in this community. And that has occurred, and it has occurred with a sense of doing it right without abusing those people at all, but it's an educational. So I'm really still stuck on that one sentence, or two sentences under G. If we could clarify that, I think, at least for me, I'd be comfortable in moving this forward.
And I don't agree with, I don't disagree with anything that you said, and I think that's the way it ought to play out. And I think if we could have the ability, if we go through those steps, if we come to you and say there's been some repeated violations, they haven't been enforced, you guys aren't doing it. If we take those steps, then at least as a bottom line, as a kind of an ultimate sort of fail-safe, we'd like to have that ability. We'd like to have the ability to go to court and get a judge to enforce them. So, like I said, this language was put in here without, I didn't want to take the trouble or try and anticipate all the kinds of issues. But when this was put in here, I anticipated there would be some discussion and refinement of that sentence. And we're willing to allow the normal process of the neighborhood complaint and enforcement to play out. And it's just, if that doesn't work, give us the peace of mind to know at the end of the day that these restrictions, that we have another form. Let's say the county doesn't have the money to keep the rangers employed. I mean, we just can't assume that what is the present intention and the stand structure is going to continue in the future. So we're happy to put this in a kind of a backseat position. We're not going to be the first people to enforce it. We don't want to be the first people to enforce it. We just want to have the peace of mind to know at the end of the day, if there's a violation occurring, and you got to figure it's going to be enough of an annoyance for the owner to take the steps necessary to enforce it. It's not going to be something minor. And that also kind of says, well, if it's that egregious, you would think the county would enforce it. But for whatever reason, I mean, the resources are stretched thin. You got to choose between your priorities, and you may say, well, it's too bad for that guy who's got the nice house at the ranch. It's too bad he doesn't like amplified music. And it may also get you off the hook, because at that point you might be able to say, well, look, you go enforce it, Mr. Owner. We don't have the resources to do it. So I'm happy to put it in that kind of subordinate position. That was really how we thought it would ultimately function anyway.
And we have actually 3 hands, so I'm going to not try to determine if this is about that, just the way they came up. Rob, Dale, and Rachel.
I'm in agreement with George that I'm not sure that this is the right language, but I understand where the applicant is coming from when we heard yesterday in our work session that when somebody horseback rides on a trail that's supposed to be rangered by open space and trails, and the dogs are supposed to be on leashes, and 8 out of 10 dogs are not on leashes.
He was saying about wilderness areas.
Well, the point is that our rangers can't be everywhere, but my question is, and I'm not sure if this is for John Ely or anybody, absent of the language that's in this section G here, what would the applicant's right of enforcing the county to enforce their laws be? I mean, does a citizen not have that right already to say, there's a dog on this trail that was off its leash, and the county's not doing anything about it, and I'm going to sue the county to enforce their laws? Does a citizen not have that right already? I'm not sure. I would think they would.
Does a citizen not have that right?
Well, does a citizen have that right?
The citizen, we maintain that a citizen, by and large, in a circumstance like that, or a circumstance having to do with other regulations of the county, does not have the right to enforce it. It's interesting.
Does that have the right of private enforcement
of county regulations? In other words, the county regulations are promulgated ultimately by the BOCC, and they are enforceable by the BOCC. So the BOCC can exercise discretion where appropriate and take whatever action the board feels is appropriate in the circumstance. It might be sort of what George was getting at with the coop situation. It might be that the discretion is exercised not to give a fine or a citation for every offense, but to give a warning or to contact a pooch owner to say this is what the regulation is, please conform, just as an educational piece without trying to issue a citation. But that type of discretion can be exercised the other way as well, and say, well, we're going to get really tough with this problem has gone on long enough, and so we're going to issue citations every time we see a problem. That type of discretion we maintain is for the entity, the BOCC, ultimately, that promulgated the regulation in the first place, not for a private citizen to interpret that regulation and to seek its application or enforcement however they see fit. Herb is concerned, as he described, the situation where the county is ignoring a violation. We would have to be concerned, of course, where Herb's client or successor interest is hypersensitive and wants to have a ticket issued on and wants to have a ranger on duty constantly. And I guess that's why I would have a problem with paragraph G as well.
And I just follow up. And I have the same problem because I think they shouldn't be the ones actually doing the enforcement, as I'm describing enforcement, not suing the county. But doesn't it make all of these other things irrelevant because we can choose not to enforce them? Like, for instance, parcel 2 can't have dogs or whatever. Like, we can choose not to enforce that. We could say, hey, we're going to put it in here and we're going to agree to it for the applicant, but we're going to decide not to enforce it so the dogs could run wild on that piece of property. So legally, we're not doing anything on A through F because we may choose not to enforce it. And he has no legal action to make us enforce those things.
Right, or perhaps it's not a question of you choosing not to enforce, but we are choosing to enforce in a particular way. On a third offense, or after a warning, or something, whatever that might be.
Or on the 100th offense.
Whatever.
Okay.
Dale, did you have something, specific response to Herb's comment?
Well, I think it's been largely covered. I'll wait.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. Rachel, please.
Thank you. I can realize the dilemma you're facing, Herb, in trying to assure your clients the 9th degree of power in this situation, default, as it were. But the language that's in front of me now certainly doesn't do that. And, to Rob's question about forcing enforcement, I can see trying to create an avenue that gives you the assurance that your complaints of your client would be heard and would be looked at. But I just think there's a lot of other bigger examples we could all think about. The sheriff's office probably isn't able to ticket every speeder on every county road all the time. It just doesn't happen. I don't think our citizens would want that to happen either. But, I don't think we can put the county in a position where we're required to spend the money to have a 24-hour watch on the property because one summer some teenagers went there and amplified music at night. How do we go after that? Realistically and in terms of resources. I think it should be our commitment that we intend to enforce the restrictions that we all end up agreeing to. And there has to be a level at some point of good faith taken with the operation of county government and county restrictions, open space and trail activities. But the language as it reads here, this sounds like a neighborhood watch program where we've started to give people the ability to enforce. No, and you can laugh, but there have been other cases where there's a public easement to reach federal lands in Woody Creek, and the ranch manager would approach people with gun in hand to say, no, you can't go up here. And these people say, yes, it is public land, this is our public right-of-way, this is our trail, and be told by someone with a shotgun, no, you can't really go up here. We don't really allow that. And so I just can't see creating that situation all over again. It took us years to resolve that situation. And that is what this language currently says. Given that there seems to be a desire to work this out, to find language that describes a third way, I would suggest that our board continue this action and not take a vote on it at this time, and require that sort of sit down between yourselves, Dale, and the county attorney to see if we can find that third way path that gives you a little more assurance that a future board or a future open space and trails program will not just blow off and ignore the restrictions that are placed on the property, but that I think you have a sense of the board of where we would like to see this go, And we'd like to just find some fairness and, respect the private property owners' both contribution and their ongoing rights to enjoyment of their property. But I don't see us wordsmithing it here and now. And again, I think that the intent of the board is clear.
Yeah, so you've heard from several of us. Now I'm going to get up to bat. Let's clear up a few things initially here. Now, what we've heard from Dale is that we have had in previous voluntary or previous dedications of land given to the public, we have had some deed restrictions, so that's a fact. And Herb, if I were to ask you as to this document, items A through F, are they acceptable?
Yes.
Because what I'm sensing here is that this doesn't set a precedent. It's not putting you're agreeable in our open space and trails program and board are cognizant of this, have moved in this direction before. So all those other items are kind of off the table as far as outstanding issues. G is an outstanding issue for me, and I will respectfully disagree with Rachel. I think we should not amend, we should eliminate. I believe that we're treading dangerous ground here about starting to have at least, neighborhood watch, maybe not so, but enforcement oversight by a property owner on public property. I believe that if there is a disturbance, something that goes on, any citizen, including this property owner, has the ability to bring that forward to any number of places, as it were, open space and trails, the BOCC directly, the sheriff, etc. And then it's in our hands to do something about it. And I think you should have expectations that we would follow up. But to put the county in a position to have language about enforcement of a public piece of property is, I think, a very bad precedent here. And I would like to ask John Ely, have we ever done this? Have we ever had language about enforcement on a property before? Literally like this situation?
I can't recall any. There might be an example out there, but certainly I don't remember.
Yeah, well, and that just reinforces where Jack's coming from. Herb, I don't mind continuing this, but I'd like you to be able to communicate with your owner and drop this item. George.
I want to clarify something that you asked John. Under G, the first sentence, John, is that something you would could consider leaving in, or do you feel? Because that's just assume that that's the role of the county to do regardless.
I wouldn't know how to interpret the first sentence. Shall be responsible for enforcing restrictions. There's no associated standard to know when the county is fulfilling its responsibility for enforcing restrictions. Are we enforcing restrictions by contacting people on site, or are we are we enforcing these restrictions by making arrests? I don't know what satisfies the application there. And also I feel that as a consequence of that, the discretion is eliminated. And the second sentence of G relates to the grantor, the current property owner, having a right to enforce the restrictions, which means, of course, the same loss of discretion and deferral of a governmental function to a private individual. And then the last sentence contemplates that an injunctive relief is available without the necessity of a bond, and taking that sentence together with the entirety of the proposed covenant or deed restriction means that, to me, what's contemplated is not so much an action of the current property owner against an individual on site who is doing something that's untoward, but an action by the current property owner against the county to require us to go out and do something that satisfies this first sentence requirement of being responsible for enforcing restrictions. So I would envision a potentially complicated scenario where a property owner who's accepted to this individual is continually bringing a complaint to us and having a fairly viable means to do so, and requiring us to take actions, and us having to respond not only in court but to have our discretion, delegated out. So the entirety of G, to me, is as currently proposed. I would recommend it.
Yeah, and I somewhat got that without the legal opinion, but for me, when we went through the hearings, and this was, as we all recognize, was somewhat of a long and arduous process, and I personally believe we and I bent over backwards to make this work, and we really tried to use every bit of knowledge we have about wildlife and potential impacts and patterns, and even had citizens show up disagreeing with us. And Rachel's right, we had a split board on this decision. But my impression when this was offered to us straight up, that's it. And you raised an important question, Rachel, about dotting the T's. I mean, the I's and crossing the T's. Maybe we need to have a discussion about that, but not right now. I think that we ought to do what we have continually done, accept this with thanks and grace and with the intention that we are going to enforce it, Herb. And I don't mind continuing this, but I can't support language that actually sets a precedent about enforcing restrictions on lands that are given to the county. That gets us in real complex situations, or at least potentially, I should say. This owner, I would expect the goodwill, you made the offer initially. And of course now we're trying to, again, dot those I's and cross the T's. So I think you've done a great job on clarifying and doing things that we might not be, meaning the Open Space Board, totally comfortable, but yeah, there's good clarifications about how this ought to operate, this property. But this one is very sensitive for me, and I'm not able. I am, of course, only one commissioner here, so. Who is for, honestly,
I'm just trying to think of process at this point, because this has been presented to us, as I understand it, as the offering from Herb's client to finalize the deal. And it's the recommendation of our staff to deny it because of provision 8. G. And that if we were to, quote, amend it, eliminate G, and pass it, that doesn't do anything because it doesn't mean that they're pro-offering it. Once we've modified it, they're no longer, it's not necessarily their offer. It's a counter-offer, if you will, from our side. And I think that it'd be best to continue and to allow that discussion to occur to see if there's any language that would not impede or unduly restrict the county, but would give the assurance to the client that these are the steps you get to take, you should take, if you feel there are violations of these restrictions that you would like the county to take action on. So maybe it is just a description. Again, I'm not trying to do anything that would do as you say you don't want, but to give them an opportunity to look at, is there a new section G that creates at least a little more assurance that the donor of the property will not have his private property negatively impacted, and is not bringing up this whole enforcement issue in the sense that it's brought up right now. That's why I suggested continuing, because an action we take and just eliminating it and approving it doesn't mean it's satisfactory. It may actually shut the door further to finally resolving this and getting the public access onto Gold Hill.
You're correct, Rachel. On the other hand, we haven't heard Herb say any of those suppositions, as it were, but we could infer. We'll go on. George?
Could I respond to that? I think Rachel's idea is a good one. And as I said, G was drafted in a very general way because I knew that I'd be having a discussion, even if open space said everything else is fine, but you need to talk to John Ely about G. I mean, I knew that was coming, and I know, and I agree with John, it's unlikely that a court would order the county to exercise a discretionary authority on an enforcement action. I mean, that's not going to happen, and I wouldn't expect that to be part of the threat that you would fear from this kind of provision. I think Rachel's exactly right. If we can articulate the steps that would be taken to give, I mean, I think, to be honest with you, Jack, at the end of the day, we are really going to want some ability, after we've exhausted all other efforts, to take this in front of the judge and say, we got a real problem here. But I think we can build in a process. I can work with John and Dale to build in a process so that it's extremely unlikely we ever get that far. And we certainly, again, I want to reiterate, there's no contemplation of having anybody out there confronting a member of the public. It wouldn't happen like that. We're not, and we could write that in, that there's no employee or owner of adjacent property. This enforcement action does not include any right to go on the property and confront violators. I mean, we don't want to put anybody in that kind of position. So I believe that with the direction today, and I realize it may not be unanimous, but some interest shown on the part of the board to accommodate this concern, with that kind of direction, I'm hopeful that the three of us could work out some language that could be brought back to you that would be acceptable to the board.
Thank you. George.
I really believed from the onset, when we first made those approvals, that it was a fairly simple transaction. We provided these new development rights to your client, and what we got back was the conveyance of these properties for the public. And it was pretty straightforward. And what I've seen happen is, which I'm comfortable with, is that you've come back, Herb, and you've actually made some specific requests. And those requests are shown from A to F. Now, those requests may have happened regardless, as Dale has said, through a management plan that Open Space and Trails always does with any property that they take over. They go through an extensive management plan with public input, similar to what we're doing right now with the Sky Ridge Park. And then from there, a plan is put into place which covers all sorts of scenarios. But so I start from that initial belief that we had an agreement between the parties. This is what we're giving you in response. This is what you're giving us. And you've gone a step further, which I can support in terms of actually having some specific requests. But G, to me, is that your owner really doesn't trust government, is what it comes down to. Doesn't trust that government will be able to provide and take care of the resources, the lands that the government owns, and in this case, the county. he doesn't believe that we're able and capable of taking care of the properties, which are thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. And that's a problem for me.
Well, George, looking at it from the other side, what if the government decided to expand the uses? Okay, let's say not put it on the other issue, not an enforcement action, but an expansion of the uses.
So that's a management plan, again.
But we've conveyed this, it was requested for specific purposes. We considered what that request was and what those purposes might involve, and we agreed, okay, the pond you could pretty much do anything you wanted with, because it was down at the bottom of the hill, it really had no impact on the ranch, and that kind of thing was contemplated when we offered the pond. There's not going to be negative impacts. So, we didn't have that concern. These are different. Both of these areas are very close, one to an existing residence and one to a proposed residence, a lot. So let's say the government wanted to expand the uses. Its property, I realize that Gold Hill is somewhat limited. It's rugged terrain. But you could imagine, special events, all kinds of things. It becomes unlimited. And so how does the owner protect himself and protect the intention and the expectation of how the property was used when he gave the gift, if there's no ability to come back and enforce some use limitations? It's a broader issue than just simply how do we go and shut down the person who's got his boombox going? That's one really small aspect of it. The bigger fear is more special event type things and opening it up to other uses. I think repeat offenders, we've got a good chance to come here and make our case that there's something going on that's not only a nuisance to us, but to other people who are trying to use the area. But we have no control whatsoever on an expansion of uses unless we can put some teeth into these restrictions.
Sure you do. We have a process. It's called a public process.
Right.
It's no different than anyone who is sitting alongside another open space or trails property or county property. There's a process, and notification to neighbors goes out to any thought of any new use, and that comes forward. There is a process. It's not a slam, bam, thank you, ma'am.
But you have quite a bit of discretion and can decide, well, for whatever reason, we think that there's an overriding reason why we want to do this, even though it's beyond the scope of what was originally intended.
Well, again, I think we should continue it, but again, I think it comes down to me that there's just not there's a level of mistrust in terms of the government or the county being able to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens, which is our charge.
Okay, well, please don't be offended by our...
I'm not offended by you, but I'll leave this last comment that I saw that your clients, who I think are contributors to the community, they want to be involved in the community, and a quote from them is, "We have made a conscious decision to get involved with this community. That's our focus moving forward. We want to get involved. We want to make a difference." Well, here's the difference.
And we're here.
And we're here. And
I tell you, we're not trying to throw a wrench in this thing.
Well, obviously you've heard that there is a wrench with G.
Well, it's not our wrench.
Well, you came up with it.
Okay, so we won't go back and forth on that one.
I don't know. There's some.
Well, I was going to, even though this is not a public hearing, this is a land use action portion of our agenda. We do have some members of the public here. If you would like to speak, I'd appreciate it if you would identify yourself and honestly, no dissertations. Just give us some comments so it might help us move forward here. Bob, would you please?
Sure. My name is Bob Wade. I'm a climber. Because of my involvement with the climbing shop, I speak with a lot of climbers, so hopefully I'm representing more than just myself here. We really appreciate that this process is going on now. We were involved a year ago when the original land use plans were being studied. And, you know, it was a little bit of a disappointment to just have this year pass. But I'm hoping we're back on track here. As Herb said, they're not in a hurry to get anything done, so I'm hoping that the county will try to push this forward, because there isn't a lot of pressure on them, perhaps time-wise. There's certainly a lot of interest in the area. Was just up climbing up the pass the other day. Probably 10 cars, 20 or 30 climbers related to the use there of a very similar sized area to Gold Butte. Just for both the county and for Herb's client, it's climbing etiquette is that we self-police. We're used to being regulated. Access has been a concern in national parks and public lands. So we're fairly intolerant of people that aren't taking care of things, and that includes noise as well as trash and things like that. So I would say that I feel it's unlikely that it'd get to the rangers that very often. I think that the area would benefit from a management plan, and the climbers, the users, would respond to that. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Boots. Boots Ferguson, not here as a lawyer, but here as a climber, but you can't leave it all for, I think. And I will not have a dissertation. A couple of comments. Number one, I think the Ranger program, much to my chagrin, has been quite successful. And they seem to be everywhere. Even if there's only one other person out there in a 2-hour snowstorm, I seem to run into the Rangers. Yeah, and I think that program has, that they take their job earnestly, and I think that they would, because of the easy access, these properties, and it's right adjacent to where they already are anyway, which is on the Rio Grande Trail, that enforcement, I think, would be just another routine program for them, and it would not stretch them. In taking a look at this, and I looked at the deed and looked at language in subparagraph G, I would agree that it is inartful. I would say that we do not have to go down and create new pathways here. I think that had the applicant proposed a conservation easement, the enforcement issue would not be in front of us, because that's a standard provision in the conservation easement world. I did not take a look from a legal perspective at the right of a citizen to enforce a nuisance action with respect to activities taking place on adjacent public lands. And then there may be a right there, and John, I haven't looked at it, but for example, we know from an open space perspective that there's often been squatters on the other side of the river, right down towards the falls. It was kind of a standard place for squatters to go. I never really took a look at the issue of a private citizen's right to say, you know, I can go, I can serve this person with a summons, and have the court deem that the activity is a nuisance, and have the court remove or at least order the citizen to move their camping gear and not squat there, since it's not a designated area for camping. So the citizen may have some rights to the extent that the activity rises to the level of being a nuisance. It goes to your point. That said, my suggestion is I support a continuance so that this enforcement language really be parsed down. Because there could be a way that's patterned after some of the conservation easement approaches that would say that after repeated violations and complete ignorance of enforcement efforts by the county and written notice to the county that the landowner would have a right to go to court and sue the citizen for creating a nuisance that that constitutes a violation of the covenants that went with the deed. There may be some room there that goes down Rachel's suggested third way, and I would support a full exploration of that with a full appreciation for Jack and George's resistance to maybe opening up new ground here for citizens. And my suggestion is that maybe we take a look at some of the paths we've already gone down and see if there's opportunity there. Bob and I used to climb here 30 years ago, 25 years ago. I don't know how many years of climbing I have left, but it would be nice since it's right down the street from where I live. And sometimes in May, this is the only climbing in the Upper Valley. It's a wonderful resource. Henry Stein allowed us to do it. And when he died, Marge was resistant because she was unfamiliar with the legal nuances. And since then, it's really been closed. We have an opportunity here to really open up a resource that we used to have. And my thought is that with some focus and diligence, with a continuance, perhaps we can come back with a proposal that would be acceptable to the commissioners and the staff could support, and it would be acceptable to the applicant. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate your feedback. Any further discussion points or comments? Rachel?
I am hopeful we can work something out in the time period of a continuance, and I'm hopeful we can get this area open this summer. Oddly enough, the failure to be able to complete a conveyance is what's held us off on doing a management plan. And, there's no reason to start a management plan and expend those dollars until you own the property. So this really does need to move forward. I appreciate that our staff saw this as a way to bring it to a head and to bring it to us. This is the best way to have gotten it further. I do want to make sure that it's clear that I am not unsympathetic to the concerns as George and Jack have raised as well here at the table. I just am hopeful that we can find language that gives everyone some assurance that we'll all be acting in good faith on this and trying to fulfill our mutual responsibilities. But I have to say I've had enough experience at the table to be called into an executive session and later said, what were they thinking when they signed this document that now, either restricts options for the board or requires actions of the board that are unpalatable. And so I don't want to create that. I want to be clear. I don't want to create something that other people then say, well, this is a precedent. You used it on this action. You've got to use it on this and go further down. I don't want to leave a legacy for future boards and future owners because you have owners who may intend one thing, but we all know there's a lot of highly paid people who come in with new interpretations of what seemed like simple language really meant. And it could be future owners who say, well, we do have the right to have a ranger. We do have the right to approach people and tap them on the shoulder. And sometimes that gets carried a little too far. So I just want to be clear that, I am supportive of the concerns that have been raised by our attorney staff and our staff as well. But at least at this point, the only real option I see is to continue and to hope for the best possible outcome.
Yeah, so Lance, if there's a motion to continue, is that at a date certain?
This isn't, it's not a notice to...
Doesn't have to be? Oh, okay, good. So, Board, we've had a rather lengthy and in-depth conversation. We've all expressed where we're coming from. It's obvious, Herb, that there's great concern on G. I sense that we're also amiable to going forward with A through F for sure. So I am going to support a motion to continue, but with no obligation to vote for it at the end, because this is I think this is a very fine legal line here. And I'm okay articulating, for example, the steps that an adjacent property owner might take if there's nuisance and whatever. But when we start creating some, or getting close to legal precedent as to where a previous property owner might, or how they might interact in a property that they've granted to the public, then, again, we don't need to be redundant. I think you understand where we come from. But what's obvious here, and I'll just say it for the sake of the obvious, that we, as a government, as representatives of the people, are very appreciative of the offer of, where this began, the ice climbing and the rock climbing, especially the rock climbing. I mean, I myself used to go there in the 70s and 80s and didn't know anything about private property, so, that's a whole different world. But, here we are today. But we all do appreciate this. We'd like to work it out. And it's got to be very carefully articulated, because I think you sense some real resistance on this side. And I understand your role in this too. So, no negatives anywhere. I think the Open Space Board brought us an important issue, and it's important when necessary to draw the line in the sand, and I think it's pretty clear where we're at. So, seeing no real urge to have further discussion, I would accept a motion to continue.
I would make a motion to continue an ordinance authorizing the Gold Butte property acquisition.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor to continue signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate all the comments, feedback, and time taken on this.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're at a portion of our agenda. Do we need we're actually going to go into exec shortly, so let's do open discussion. John, would you have anything for us today?
Yeah, and I'm just pulling an item up here.
Dale, thank you, and your board.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
The board had asked for additional information in the transit-oriented development study from LAFTA. Just can't get the timing right today. I thought for sure we were going to be later in the day. So I do have some additional information about it. It is a study that actually RAFTA started talking about back in 2006, it appears, and they looked at applying for a grant for about a $55,000 study at that time to include the whole Highway 82 corridor that they're serving, to see if there are some opportunities to work with local jurisdictions on land use plans that would connect walkable communities with the transit nodes that RAFTA is developing. That project didn't happen at that time, and then RAFTA got, I think, engaged in the Velociraptor project, and that really has taken their attention, but now they're finishing, or starting, I guess, finish the planning process for Velociraptor and receive the funding, and they're in the project implementation. They're revisiting this idea of working with local communities to identify opportunities more in a strategic planning kind of format in a way to see if there's ways to coordinate the investment in mass transit with land use decisions that would reduce dependence on oil and such in communities on the Highway 82 corridor. And so they are now estimating that the project will be between $85,000 and $100,000. They're applying for grant dollars through CDOT and the Colorado Heritage Grant, which I'm not familiar with. But they have asked a number of jurisdictions, each for a $2,500 contribution towards match on those grants. That includes Garfield County, Eagle County, Pickens County, City of Glenwood Springs, Town of Carbondale, Town of Basalt, Snowmass Village, and Aspen. So that the same request has gone out to all those entities that participate with RAFTA. We don't have any confirmation as to who is committed to that $2,500 yet. It's unlikely that the study would have direct impact on planning in Pickens County because of really limited opportunities outside of what's already happening within the urban growth boundary. And I think we pay a lot of attention already to the pedestrian connectivity and the connectivity within our community. But there's probably significant opportunities as you move further down valley to be looking at maybe adjustments to those land use patterns. And we have the dollars already, we have enough appropriations already, so we wouldn't need a supplemental budget, but we did not want to necessarily jump into a partnership without the board being aware and at least giving a head nod that you think this is a reasonable way for the county to partner with RAFTA to look and see if there are better opportunities to plan our communities along the Highway 82 corridor to take advantage of the investments in mass transit that we've been making. So I can send to you the documents, the feasibility study documents and such. I did not bring copies because they're kind of lengthy and probably wouldn't have been appropriate for open discussion. I can try and answer questions from there. Oh, and just, Rob, this came up yesterday after you left during open discussion that we're looking at participating in a grant match with RAFTA.
And John, you did indicate yesterday that it's already within the general fund ComDev budget.
We believe we can cover it under existing appropriations. It's not a large amount of money at the end of the day, but again, we didn't want you to get a thank you letter or something and then be surprised that we were partnering on something like that.
And just from one commissioner's perspective, I very much appreciate that because I would not want to enter into a process which I, again, only speaking for myself, I'm very concerned because I don't want to see more development next to the highways. It's already, if the purpose of this was to modify land use codes on undeveloped properties already or properties that have not been built, that's how I should say it, yes, better yet, because there are some approvals. That's excellent, and we can, maybe benefit as a valley community. But golly, when I think of transit stations and just more density for the sake of, it's convenient and someone wants to cash in on their real estate, that is a real simplistic, but a real concern for me,
And, I think nothing would happen without the cooperation of the entities that really have land use authority anyway. But I do think the study would cover, Jack, both potential infill or redevelopment opportunities as well as greenfield, because you'd have to ask those questions in the course of a study like this.
Right. Rachel.
Yeah, I support the request. I think that when you look at larger issues such as land use planning, there's always two sides to every coin, pluses and minuses. I certainly agree with you, Jack, about concerns of visual impacts along the highway and density along the highway. I'm equally concerned with sprawl into other areas. And sometimes these sort of studies will prod a chain of thought within a community to say, well, where do we want our density? And perhaps there's down zonings at the same time that there's up zonings. Where do we want our patterns of growth to occur? And rather than willy-nilly and, based on who wants to sell when and going to pursue random approvals for high density that are significantly away from, transit hubs that have their own set of impacts. So it may point out opportunities to some communities. It may spur further thinking about, are their codes currently sufficient? Are there existing codes around these areas going to get them what they want? So I think that there's value to it, and I also think it's part of being a little bit of a regional partnership. There's been times when we've offered comments to other jurisdictions that are outside of our own, but we were never really able to refer back to any sort of plan that said, well, if you are going to do this, what's it going to get you at the end of the day, and how's it beneficial or not? So the other thought that does strike me is whether we agree or disagree. There has been a bit of a pattern of growth in the past of other larger employers buying and developing affordable housing outside of Pickens County for their long-term needs that impact those other communities, and it may help steer some of that type of activity, should it go forward in the future, towards transit-oriented development of where these housing nodes will be, as opposed to, cheaper rezoning of green fields far off the transportation corridor. So I think that we may have more of an interest in it than we realize at first. When we see the ski company had started the Keter, to run the Keter Grove project, or other housing purchases throughout the lower valley. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I can support this. I guess my question is, we're going to make a commitment, and depending on if RAPTA receives the grant or not, if for some reason they don't receive the grant, then those monies obviously...
We won't distribute any monies until they... Yeah,
I think the positive part, as Rachel was talking about, was being able to be a little more proactive. So right now, I think what's happening with RAPTA is they're getting pressure by developers who are throwing, some incentives to RAPTA that they can then bring forth to the approving governing body for those land use decisions. And it puts RAPTA in a difficult position, that sort of like the position we get put in for special events when the city of Aspen comes before us at the last minute saying, well, we've got this event, you need to contribute. So it may be a bad analogy, but the idea is I think this will then provide a pathway for RAPTA to determine and to be able to provide this information to those governing authority bodies who make these land use decisions, that this is an appropriate place and this is not, and we don't want developers to be throwing sort of incentives to RAPTA to be able to encourage them to put a stop here where perhaps it's not the right place to have that stop.
Okay. I think I've got direction.
Yeah, our reservations stand, but due to the regional nature of what we do, and we've offered opinions, strong opinions on development, and if development can be managed, say, to a better, more efficient end, we got to give it a shot. So.
That's very close to. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying I think I agree with everybody across the board on everything you've said. I think it's a proactive way of planning for it.
Excellent. Okay.
Anything else, John, as far as
just one more quick thing. I think it's couple weeks back now, Rachel, you had brought up a request to start getting the word out about defensible space and that sort of thing. And as the board, I think, has seen, we have stood up a incident management team now for wildfire season, and we've the sheriff, in cooperation with the fire chiefs, has put a burn ban in effect for Pickens County. We have stood up an emergency preparedness website with information for the public, which is www.pickenemergency.org. If you get on that website, you can access information about both the fire ban, how to sign up for Pick and Alert, what's happening during wildfire season. We've also started crawling messages across grassroots television. We've put on some shows on defensible space, and we kind of got on the fire ban track, and now we're going to go back and start working on those defensible space messages and such, and that is in cooperation with the fire districts and the sheriff's department. So just wanted to update you on that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, John. It's obviously pretty critical, and the cooperation amongst everyone, both government jurisdictions, special districts, are going to be critical in meeting this potential challenge. George?
I think this is happening, but I'm just curious, John, since Pickens County has a fire ban, are we coordinating with Eagle County and Garfield? Because one side of the street could be Eagle County, the other side could be Pickens County. If Eagle County doesn't have a fire ban, it's not going to help the residents in Pickens counties.
Yeah, my understanding is that Eagle County has implemented a fire ban. Garfield County has not implemented a fire ban at this point. And in my discussions with Joe, which were fairly brief, he's not expecting that Garfield County will be implementing a fire ban based on his discussions. And so Eagle County has, and that's right.
And George, you finished? Are you aware if Eagle County has also taken some proactive steps as far as public, involvement, et cetera, like you just articulated with our incident command, et cetera?
I am not sure what Eagle County is doing, but we can look into that.
Yeah, I might just ask the question. So we know the response teams are all together.
Right, and a lot through our translator system and such, our CGTV signal and such, is reaching into those areas of Eagle County, like through Elgeville and Carbondale, as far down as Carbondale.
Yeah, it's also reaching into Garfield County with sunlight.
That's right.
The major. So it's a little disturbing that Garfield County doesn't recognize the severity and not responding.
And one other thought, and might be already included, but for example, we know with the frying pan, they don't get TV. Would we just notify caucuses, just a nice heads up, hey, and we can identify them because of the TV, but there are plenty enough other spots, and they might have their own internal, email link system.
And absolutely, Jack. And in fact, we have plans too where we're developing firebrand brochures. Those will be distributed very broadly, and we'll be sure. I think we've already contacted the caucuses, but I will double check on that.
Yeah,
great.
Get it on the website.
Yeah.
Good.
That's it for me.
Board, any open discussion from board members? Okay, I understand we have an exec session. I would like to ask for a motion to go in executive session. John, what CRS statute?
It would be pursuant to CRS 246402-4B, which is attorney-client communication conference, and this would be to discuss and let's check, I guess, the issues that everybody wants to get under. My understanding is that we're going to go to executive session based upon a discussion yesterday that involved the work session item related to Avalanche Ranch and the Forest Service, not Avalanche Ranch, Avalanche Mine up Avalanche Creek related to a Forest Service permit there, as well as
open space, just a clarification.
As well as open space actions vis-a-vis BOCC, Rachel brought up the issue of the application that will be in front of the board on a continuance for our next regular meeting. I forget the applicant's name, but it's the property down in Shieldo that is particularly constrained due to its size and position on the county road.
Corner.
Potentially, I'm not sure if the board wanted to discuss this as well, which is a direction and discussion vis-a-vis a protest, potential protest to the Department of Justice handling of the SG Limited 2 complaint vis-a-vis their violation of antitrust laws.
Yeah, and also, isn't there, John, the personnel item, a very brief personnel item?
I could address that today, yeah.
Okay, so
those are the items I've heard about. I don't know how much the board wanted to do it, given that this was not, regularly scheduled.
well, let's put it, all of that is inclusive of topics, and it was that B or D?
B, 4B.
D, yeah. Okay, so in order, for efficiency's sake, I'm going to make a motion to go in executive session under CRS 246-4024B. I believe that is the correct statute. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good, we're in executive session. John, you want to go upstairs?
Can you just take a little break and let them
Oh,
turn
yeah.
on the TV and
We're
then
gonna-
stay here?